在这里，有一只胸怀世界的小鸟。每年秋季，小小的北京雨燕开始迁飞，一路穿越37个国家，最终抵达南非高原。
For them, the Earth is a whole. The countries they fly across are all homes. No matter they are big or small, powerful or weak, rich or poor. Humans are to coexist harmoniously with nature and all things on Earth. China will work together with the world to protect this planet we call home.
在这里，我们的祖先祭祀天地，祈愿风调雨顺，谷物丰收。
The elegant Chinese characters were inspired by the beauty of life in nature. The classical book of songs expresses the sincere feelings through describing various beings in the world. The Chinese civilization has always respected and loved nature and valued the harmony between man and nature. Giant pandas are a species from 8 million years ago. China has set up the Giant Panda National Park that covers 27,000 square kilometers of mountain forest. Nearly 2,000 wild pandas are living freely and producing here. Setting eco-red line, building national parks, establishing nature reserves, and keeping a distance from wild species reflect people's willingness to restrain their own behavior and to give way to wild species. The germplasm resource banks and gene banks around the country hold the survival code of millions of species, protecting the valuable assets for humankind. Forest conservation and the holistic conservation and restoration of mountain, river, forest, farmland, lake, grassland, and desert ecosystems are bringing back lucid waters, lush mountains, blue sky, and white clouds.
像保护眼睛一样保护自然和生态环境。这个理念在中国深入人心。在这里，曾经灭绝的麋鹿不但恢复了种群数量，还被成批野化放归大自然。
Thanks to the unremitting efforts by China, many extinct or endangered wild species are regaining confidence and dignity. The elevation of Yunnan varies from 70 meters to 6,700 meters. It's a kingdom of animals and plants. People's efforts to protect biological diversity is speeding up at the moment. China is taking actions to accomplish the mission. Human beings have put forward a proposal to protect the biological diversity and to build a shared future for all life on Earth.
在这里，有一只胸怀世界的小鸟。每年秋季，小小的北京雨燕开始迁飞，一路穿越37个国家，最终抵达南非高原。
For them, the Earth is a whole. The countries they fly across are all homes. No matter they are big or small, powerful or weak, rich or poor. Humans are to coexist harmoniously with nature and all things on Earth. China will work together with the world to protect this planet we call home.
尊敬的各位部长、各位代表，欢迎回到高级别会议全体会议。接下来呢，我们将继续按照发言的顺序进行发言。由于我们上午发言这个严重的延误，我们现在呢还有一个很长的发言清单，因此呢，我将尽量的减少改动，严格控制时间。秘书处呢为此呢专门安排了一个铃铛，在3分钟的时候呢将摇响，超过1分钟的话呢，这个铃铛将再次摇响。如果缔约方和组织代表在这些提示后仍然没有结束发言的话呢，那么麦克风可能就被掐断了我想主要还是希望大家能够在这方面管理好发言的时间感谢各位的理解和配合。我们要让所有的发言者都有机会发言。在邀请各国代表发言之前，我还是首先邀请3位嘉宾进行主旨发言。第一位发言嘉宾是联合国秘书长海洋事务特使皮特·汤姆森先生，有请。
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I live in fear of the bell, so I better be quick. Look, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor of addressing you today in my capacity as the UN Secretary General's Special Envoy for the ocean within which 80% of the biodiversity of planet Earth is contained, but also speak as a former President of the UN General Assembly and as the citizen of a small island developing country. Most importantly, I stand here, or I sit here actually, as the grandfather of 4 young girls, the youngest of whom is not yet 3. Along with children throughout the 7 continents and the ocean's scattered islands, she will inherit 21st century conditions shaped by the outcomes of this conference. My youngest granddaughter will be 80 when dawn rises on the 22nd century. Will she have spent her life within an environment flourishing in the embrace of bounteous nature, or is her generation condemned to a bitter struggle in dark dystopian days? That, ladies and gentlemen, is the question. It is the question that is central to our deliberations here in Montreal. And either we embrace intergenerational justice or we miss the essential point of being here at all. These words are not hyperbole. They're the honest reportage of current realities, informed by IPCC, IPBES, and the WMO. The United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has already declared a red alert for humanity, saying that we've been making war on nature and that we're on track towards an unlivable world, that's a 3 degrees world, and that we must make peace with nature without delay. If the outcomes of this biodiversity conference produce the universal transformational targets required to stop the predicted wave of near-term mass extinctions on planet Earth, we will have put the sword to that dystopian future that so many people predict. Meet the targets set by the Paris Climate Agreement, the Sustainable Development Agenda, and the UN Biodiversity Conference, and today's leaders will have fulfilled the tasks demanded of them. And our grandchildren will have the environmental security we wish for them. Ladies and gentlemen, for the global biodiversity framework to be true to its purpose, the ocean within it must be commensurate to its planetary role. The ocean's place within it must be commensurate to its planetary role. From the awe-inspiring creatures of the deep ocean to the struggles of life in the polar regions, from the tiny photosynthetic organisms producing half the planet's oxygen to the teeming nutrition existing along our shorelines, that role is paramount, and we turn our backs on the ocean at our peril. Therefore, I say again, the ocean is home to some 80% of the planet's biodiversity, and pure logic demands that its place within the global biodiversity framework be fortified. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, in 1987 in Montreal, we finalized the global agreement to protect the stratospheric ozone layer by phasing out ozone-depleting substances. Unchecked, without the protective shield of that ozone layer, we would have been subjected to life-threatening levels of ultraviolet radiation. Universally ratified, the Montreal Protocol stands today as a shining example of multilateral cooperation, delivering on point. When we depart Montreal this weekend, we must do so in the knowledge that we have again exercised the very best of multilateralism, and that as a result of our coming together in consensus, the remaining biodiversity of this planet has the reprieve it needs to survive, and that intergenerational justice has indeed been seen to have been done. I thank you for your attention.
谢谢您，谢谢汤姆斯先生。下面我有请我们第2位主旨发言的嘉宾，他是生物多样性公约联盟临时主任科兰·巴拉特雷迪先生，有请。
Thank you, Mr. President. I speak on behalf of the CBD Alliance. We look to the commitment of you, excellencies and ministers, to elevate human rights to the level they deserve, in the relevant goals and targets and with relevant indicators that are firmly based in social science and gender differentiated. The current Section B bis can at most be complementary to this. We particularly insist on guaranteeing protection of human rights and the rights of indigenous people, women, local communities in Target 3, and a specific reference to respect for the territories and customary lands, and we need to have clear headline indicators on this. The global biodiversity framework has to be based on the principles of equity and common but differentiated responsibilities. High-income nations bear the overwhelming responsibility for global ecological breakdown and need to urgently reduce their overexploitation of resource use to fair and sustainable levels. Excellencies, we strongly support the new EU regulation on deforestation-free commodities in this respect. We call for its expansion to cover human rights, other ecosystems, and the financial sector, and we call on other countries with a significant ecological footprint to adopt similar legally binding regulations. Developed countries owe an ecological debt to the rest of the world and must provide the necessary finance to developing countries in line with their legal obligations under the Convention on Biological Diversity. We firmly reject the notion of all sources of finance, as this might include very harmful sources of funding like carbon offsets, biodiversity offsets, or mass tourism. We cannot end up in a situation where 30% of the planet is being protected through financial resources earned through destroying 70% of the planet. We reiterate our opposition to the use of terms like nature-based solution and nature positive. These are merely slogans which replace biodiversity with meaningless, unmeasurable terms and invite endless greenwashing and false solutions rather than meaningful science-based action to protect biodiversity. It should have no place in global biodiversity framework. The three objectives of the convention need to be implemented equitably and in a balanced manner, as none can be achieved without the other. In this slide, we reiterate our call for an equitable, gender, just, and effective benefit sharing mechanism for digital sequence information. Thank you, Mr. President.
谢谢您，谢谢雷迪先生。下面呢，有请我们主旨发言的第3位嘉宾，世界自然基金会总干事马克·兰博丁尼先生，有请。
Thank you, Mr. President, and Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. I'm delivering this statement on behalf of 6 international environmental organizations followed by millions of people: BirdLife International, Campaigns of Nature, Conservation International, the Nature Conservancy, Wildlife Conservation Society, and the Worldwide Fund for Nature. Let us firstly underscore the tragedy and the dangerous impact of nature loss, as dangerous as climate change, and in fact, deeply interconnected with it. There is no room for complacency. There is no time for delays. Nature loss today is no longer an isolated ecological issue, but is increasingly a security issue for humanity and a justice issue, an intergenerational justice issue at the same time. Whether it is to combat climate change and keep the 1.5 degrees alive, to prevent the next pandemic of zoonotic origin, to secure food, water, livelihoods, and human well-being, and deliver the right to a healthy environment to all, it is blatantly clear that we need to halt and reverse nature loss by 2030 for a nature-positive world, so we have more nature at the end of the decade, not less. This is the global goal that the GBF should codify in its mission. This is equivalent for nature of the 1.5 degrees for climate, and give governments, businesses, investors, consumers, IPLCs, and the whole of society a common goal towards which they can all contribute. This will require ministers to resolve existing differences and land an ambitious, human rights-based and transformational global biodiversity framework with 5 elements. A clear and ambitious mission to halt and reverse nature loss by 2030 and build a nature-positive world. This is going to be the new North Star, Southern Cross for all of us to deliver a sustainable future. Second, an inclusive 30 by 30 target. Science is demanding that. Third, firm action to transform drivers of nature loss, critical to sustainably manage the 70% remaining. And fourth, adequate resource mobilization and a clear ratcheting and implementation mechanism. And fifth, a commitment to nature-based solutions with the right safeguards. A weak global biodiversity framework, it's not acceptable. It will perpetuate a business-as-usual nature-negative economy, allowing for more loss of nature and socioeconomic impact and inequality. A strong GBF is essential for unlocking more funding, and unlocking funding is essential for a strong GBF. The two need to go hand in hand. We need more funding from more sources. We need more funds going to developing countries, which must be more accessible and more quickly in order to close the financing gap for biodiversity. We welcome constructive proposals from parties in this direction that we know are under discussion, and we hope to see soon convergence and agreement. Mr. President, I conclude by urging the world leaders not to miss this opportunity to choose the right side of history by adopting a clear plan to halt and reverse nature loss by 2030 and build a nature-positive world. It's possible, and more importantly, is necessary. I thank you.
谢谢您，谢谢兰博丁尼先生。我们下午的主旨发言环节呢，就到此结束。再次感谢汤姆森先生、雷迪先生和兰博丁尼先生的发言和支持。
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
好，我们现在呢就继续上午我们的发言顺序，继续邀请各国部长发言。我再次邀请大家配合，将您的发言时间限定在3分钟以内。首先，我邀请利比里亚环境部副部长兰德尔·多巴尤2世阁下发言。在利比里亚之后，将是埃塞俄比亚。多巴尤2世部长阁下，有请。
The government and people of Canada, the government of the People's Republic of China, Madam Executive Secretary of the Convention on Biological Diversity, distinguished representative of governments and people of the 196 parties to this Convention on Biodiversity, ladies and gentlemen, I bring you greetings from the President of the Republic of Liberia, President George Weah, through the Executive Director of the Environmental Protection Agency, on this occasion of hosting the COP-15 of this significant convention. Mr. Chair, Liberia's biodiversity resources and its ecosystems are critical to the social and economic survival of the people of Liberia. Importantly, we are home to the largest remaining portion of the Upper Guinea rainforest in West Africa, for which Liberia has committed to protecting at least 30% on unwavering conservation approaches. As Liberia prioritizes the conservation and sustainable use of these natural habitats, which our people depend on for their livelihood, climate regulation, and protection and prevention of diseases, we hope the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework also includes targets that demand concrete global actions toward mitigating the negative impact on biodiversity. A new ambitious strategic plan matched with the required financial resources is needed to address the triple crisis of biodiversity loss, climate change, and pollution. This ambitious plan will enable us to reset our relationship and make peace with nature. Your Excellency, having a realistic strategy to raise the needed resources is a priority for Liberia. This is why Liberia strongly supports a realistic resource mobilization target as contained in Target 19.1, particularly articulated by the African Group of Negotiators and like-minded African countries. Additionally, Liberia supports establishing a biodiversity trust fund dedicated exclusively to mobilizing resources for implementing the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. In conclusion, Mr. Chairman, we urge everyone to be reminded of our role as caretakers of biodiversity resources and ecosystems that we have inherited, but with an obligation to protect, conserve, and sustainably manage. Therefore, our collective obligation is to ensure that these resources and ecosystems remain in good health and strive for the next generation. That is the obligation we have, and that is the duty we must honor. Thank you very much. Yeah.
感谢部长阁下您的发言。下面我邀请埃塞俄比亚国家自然资源发展部部长埃亚苏·伊莱亚斯阁下发言。在埃塞俄比亚之后将是古巴。伊莱亚斯部长阁下，有请。
Thank you, Mr. President. Please allow me to express my gratitude to His Excellency Mr. Han Grunke, Minister of Ecology and Environment of China, for leading this important COP, and equally to the Government of Canada for the successful co-hosting of this COP. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, everyone agrees that biodiversity is the basis of all socioeconomic development, particularly for less developed countries. Ethiopia is one of the mega diverse countries for its rich biological diversity. However, these resources are sternly vanishing because of droughts and floods and related to climate change effects. For example, in 2022 alone, Ethiopia lost millions of indigenous livestock population in the pastoral lowlands that are hard hit by the recurrent droughts. Such calamities will get even worsened if appropriate measures and timely actions are not taken with the full commitment of the government and the international community. In this regard, the post-2020 GBF that's currently being negotiated holds a great opportunity to halt biodiversity loss, and we look forward to its full materialization. Ethiopia has formulated climate-resilient green economy strategy that aims at sustaining biodiversity resources through afforestation and integrated watershed management for landscape restoration. For example, the first phase of the Green Legacy Initiative has achieved the planting of 25 billion tree seedlings over the past 4 years. And with 80% of survival rate, these trees would contribute substantially in sequestering greenhouse gas emissions from the industrial countries. This is a clear manifestation of Ethiopia's government and people's commitment for global environmental sustainability and biodiversity conservation and climate change adaptation and mitigation. Mr. President, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the adoption of the current GBF in COP-15 is crucially important to strengthen such national and regional level efforts to deal with ecosystem degradation and biodiversity loss. As it's evident from the ongoing negotiations, the post-2020 GBF has global ambitions as manifested by the proposed targets 1, 2, 3, but the materialization of this requires more realistic actions and less words and fruitless negotiations and motions. We therefore hope that the main outcomes of COP-15 will be a package of decisions on the proposed targets, particularly Target 3, 30 by 30 DSI, and effective resource mobilization and financing mechanisms. In addition, we do hope that the benefit sharing from genetic resources will be based on principles of respecting the customs and practices of indigenous peoples and local communities. Mr. President, I can assure you that Ethiopian government is committed for the successful implementation of the GBF, and we expect similar commitments from concerned parties. I thank you, Mr. President.
谢谢部长阁下，感谢您的发言。下面我邀请古巴科学技术与环境部副部长阿蒂亚涅斯·达波塔·沙莫拉阁下发言。在古巴之后是卢森堡。沙莫拉部长阁下，有请。
Señor Presidente, distinguidos ministros, autoridades y delegados, agradezco a nombre del Gobierno de Cuba al Ministerio de Ecología y Medio Ambiente de la República Popular China por la organización de este evento y expresamos nuestra satisfacción por la hospitalidad de las autoridades del pueblo de Montreal. Señor Presidente, las acciones para detener y revertir la pérdida de la diversidad biológica y el uso sostenible de la misma son desafíos complejos de vencer para los países en desarrollo, que están obligados a emplear sus limitados recursos financieros y tecnológicos en el enfrentamiento a la crisis multidimensional que se agravó con el azote de la pandemia de la COVID-19. Nuestro optimismo nos lleva a trabajar de manera solidaria y sostenida a nivel global, pues la mayor parte de los desafíos ambientales no se circunscriben a nuestras fronteras, si bien en primer lugar deben ser enfrentados nacionalmente teniendo en cuenta las circunstancias y particularidades de cada país. Cuba expresa su respaldo a un marco estratégico global de la diversidad biológica post-2020 que refleje de manera balanceada los objetivos del convenio que sus metas sean globales, portadoras de compromisos concretos y que en modo alguno condicionen la implementación a nivel nacional. La meta de financiación sostiene la legitimidad y efectividad del marco estratégico. De ahí la importancia de la definición clara de los montos financieros a comprometer, fundamentalmente por los países desarrollados. Los argumentos son conocidos: justicia histórica ambiental, responsabilidades comunes pero diferenciadas, entre otros. El incumplimiento de estos compromisos sin dudas pudiera acarrear peores consecuencias para la biodiversidad mundial. Un reto de semejante magnitud en el que descansa la supervivencia de las actuales y futuras generaciones solo puede enfrentarse con una sólida voluntad política. Cuba ha consagrado en su Constitución el derecho al disfrute de un medio ambiente sano y equilibrado, que unido al Plan Nacional de Desarrollo Económico y Social hasta el 2030, establece como una de sus prioridades ambientales la atención a la pérdida de la biodiversidad, lo que ha permitido avanzar en la gestión sostenible y restauración de ecosistemas marinos costeros y terrestres como los arrecifes de coral, playas, herbasares de ciénaga, manglares, entre otros. En la actualidad se realiza el proceso de elaboración de nuevas metas nacionales, las que serán ambiciosas pero acorde a nuestras circunstancias. Estas constituirán nuestra contribución al logro de las metas mundiales. Señoras y señores, a pesar de las limitaciones que implica el bloqueo económico, financiero y comercial impuesto por los Estados Unidos a Cuba y recrudecido sin precedentes, reafirmamos nuestra voluntad de avanzar en la preservación de la diversidad biológica y su uso sostenible. Sin bloqueo, nuestro país tendría para estos propósitos más acceso a recursos financieros, insumos y tecnologías, y menos limitaciones para el desarrollo de su cooperación internacional, en especial la Sur-Sur. Cuba, por último, reitera su disposición a continuar participando de forma activa en la identificación de las mejores soluciones, con el fin de lograr un mundo más justo y ambientalmente sano para las futuras generaciones. Muchas gracias.
谢谢部长阁下，感谢您的发言。下面我邀请卢森堡环境、气候和可持续发展部副部长安德烈·威登豪普特阁下发言。在卢森堡之后是瑞士。威登豪普特部长阁下，有请。
Monsieur le Président, Excellences, distingués délégués, Mesdames, Messieurs, chers collègues. Tout d'abord, un grand merci de ma part à la Chine, au Canada, au Québec et à la ville de Montréal et tous ses habitants si aimables et si gentils. La COP-15 a lieu à un moment de multiples crises environnementales, biodiversité, climat, ressources et pollution, assorties de crises géopolitiques. La COP-15 marque un événement historique pour le futur de la biodiversité et de l'humanité et joue un rôle clé pour relever les défis afin d'aboutir à un cadre global stratégique fort pour la biodiversité, le GBF, avec des objectifs précis et robustes. Au futur, COP15 devra être synonyme d'avoir fixé les jalons pour, premièrement, mettre en place un système mondial cohérent d'air protégé sur au moins 30% des surfaces mondiales terrestres et marines. Deuxièmement, mobiliser et aligner les ressources nécessaires pour combler le déficit de financement. Troisièmement, intégrer la sauvegarde de la biodiversité dans les politiques transversales et la fin des subsides nocifs à l'environnement. Et quatrièmement, aller au-delà des indicateurs économiques standards par la mise en place d'un objectif chiffré de l'empreinte écologique. COP15 ne saurait en aucun cas être synonyme d'échec de la communauté mondiale pour préserver notre futur commun. Les ambitions financières doivent être à la hauteur des ambitions et objectifs chiffrés du GBF et vice-versa. Dans ce contexte, il me paraît important de promouvoir les partenariats et initiatives innovantes permettant de mobiliser des fonds privés pour les projets durables. Afin d'adresser au maximum les synergies pour faire face tant à la crise de la biodiversité qu'à celle du climat, le Luxembourg utilise une grande partie de son financement climatique international pour soutenir des projets d'adaptation basés sur la nature. Le quadruplement du financement international luxembourgeois dédié à la biodiversité jusqu'en 2026 constitue un maillon fort afin de combler les défis mondiaux en matière de biodiversité, même si le montant absolu du Luxembourg reste modeste. Permettez-moi de faire un appel à nous tous d'agir responsables, généreux, tant humbles que visionnaires pour garantir un succès à cette COP cruciale. Chers collègues, il nous reste peu de temps pour finir le travail des 4 dernières années et de ficeler un cadre mondial qui sera inscrit dans l'histoire comme un moment où tout a changé. Je suis optimiste quant à notre capacité d'y arriver avant de quitter Montréal et de couronner la COP-15 de succès. Je vous remercie.
谢谢部长阁下，感谢您的发言。下面呢，我邀请瑞士环境部国务秘书卡特琳·施奈贝尔格阁下发言。在瑞士之后是马尔代夫，施奈贝尔格阁下有请。
Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, biodiversity is our very livelihood. It is the natural resource base for all life on Earth, fundamental for our well-being, prosperity, and ultimately our survival. But we all know biodiversity is threatened globally, but also on a local level in each and every country. Here at this COP, we need to adopt an ambitious framework to stop and reverse the loss of biodiversity. We need a framework with relevant, clear, and measurable goals and targets addressing the main drivers of biodiversity loss. We need a framework that is backed with headline indicators and a mechanism for planning, reporting, and review. We need a framework that is synergetic and embraces all biodiversity-related agreements and institutions, and that is supported by a comprehensive and effective approach to resource mobilization that addresses the real needs. Thereby, Switzerland fully endorses the target to preserve and protect 30% of our planet's surface on land and on sea for biodiversity by 2030. Mr. President, all relevant conventions have to contribute to the implementation of the framework. The Bern process had strengthened the involvement of these conventions in the development of the GBF. The Bern process should continue to promote the synergetic implementation of the GBF by all biodiversity-relevant conventions. Switzerland is ready to continue to support this process. We all know implementation needs support, and some of our partners do not have the capacity to implement the GBF alone. However, public money from traditional donors alone will not be sufficient. All parties that have the capacity must support those who need support, and all sources, domestic and international, public and private financial flows have to contribute to finance biodiversity and to align with biodiversity objectives. Dear colleagues, let us now work towards an ambitious framework and to deliver on the CBD's vision of living in harmony with nature. I thank you very much for your attention.
谢谢部长阁下，感谢您的发言。下面我邀请马尔代夫环境、气候变化和技术国务部长阿卜杜拉·纳塞尔阁下发言。在马尔代夫之后将是乌兹别克斯坦。纳塞尔部长阁下有请。
Thank you, Mr. President. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the Maldives would like to thank the People's Republic of China for the excellent leadership in holding the COP presidency. And we would also like to thank the government and the people of Canada for the exceptional hospitality here in Montreal. The Maldives is a large ocean state. Our coastal and marine biodiversity is what we depend on entirely. Coral reefs provide us life and livelihoods. We are making history here in Montreal when we adopt the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. Addressing triple planetary crisis has become a question of our very own existence, and therefore we are calling for components of island biodiversity conservation to be fully integrated into the GBF. Effective implementation of the GBF and its monitoring framework are necessary to halt and reverse biodiversity loss and becoming nature positive. And to do this, it is necessary to align the means of implementation which are priorities of developing countries. We recognize the importance of nature financing, and we are doing what we can domestically. The Maldives has already started working on innovative, sustainable financing mechanisms, where we have introduced a green tax on tourism for the exclusive use of coral reefs, which contributes to a national green fund. We have also embarked on ambitious initiatives to value nature and incorporate natural capital accounting into our planning process. The Maldives endorses the 10-point plan for financing biodiversity, along with now more than 40 other countries. The Maldives has initiated numerous measures and actions towards reducing threats to biodiversity. We have started a project on ocean-wide marine spatial planning that will be aligned with the outcomes of Target 1. The target on restoration is immensely important for us, the Maldives, because we rely on fragile coral reefs and associated ecosystems, which are in critical need of restoration and recovery. We are calling for an ambitious area-based global conservation target, popularly now known as 30 by 30. Nationally, we have now declared more than 20% of our coastal and marine areas as legally protected. This includes more than 30% of coral reefs. This will be greatly enhanced further with the recognition of other effective area-based conservation measures in partnership with the private sector. Coastal and marine areas of the Maldives are a sanctuary for all species of sharks, rays, marine turtles, whales, dolphins, amongst many others, all protected by law. Mr. President, time is running out, especially for small island states who are at the forefront of biodiversity and the climate crisis. The responsibilities lie with all of humanity to ensure that nature survives and that we do not become the generation that takes away the right to a healthy environment from future generations. I thank you.
谢谢，感谢部长阁下，感谢您的发言。下面我邀请乌兹别克斯坦国家生态与环境保护委员会主席纳尔祖罗·奥布罗·穆拉多夫阁下发言，然后是法国奥布罗·穆拉多夫阁下，有请。
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dear ladies and gentlemen, heads of delegations. First of all, let me on behalf of Uzbekistan delegation express thanks to organizers, the Government of People's Republic of China and the Government of Canada for excellent organization and hospitality during this important event. Let me to extend my greetings to distinguished delegates, member parties, to all participants of CBD COP-15 meeting. Today marks significant milestone, launch of UN Decade of Action to Deliver Global Goals, UN Decade for Ecosystem Restoration, as well as international collaboration on ambitious post-2020 global biodiversity framework. The complexity of environmental challenges that we face today combined with the impact of COVID-19 pandemic, clearly indicates the urgent need to establish platforms for dialogue and cooperation. Getting back on track to achieve sustainable development goals, addressing pressures of the climate crisis requires all of us to unite our efforts, going beyond individual problems toward formulating integrated solutions. We can and must ensure sustainable human development which is in harmony with nature. Uzbekistan has suffered severely from Aral Sea crisis, which resulted in huge biodiversity loss, land degradation, air pollution, generating multiple environmental challenges along the way. Formerly known as the fourth biggest lake in the world, the Aral Sea, losing nearly 90% of its water body, is now proclaimed as one of the biggest man-made environmental disasters. In 2017, with President Mirziyoyev's initiative, an extensive afforestation campaign targeting Aral seabed was launched, and as of today, almost 2 million hectares of seabed is planted with trees and seedlings. In 2018, the UN multi-partner Human Security Trust Fund for the Aral Sea region established, which became a reliable platform for the government of Uzbekistan and its shareholders, stakeholders and partners, including United Nations, international donors, as well as financial institutions. This joint platform aims to adopt a people-centric approach to tackling challenges caused by Aral Sea crisis. Together with the initiatives mentioned above, Government of Uzbekistan is supporting ongoing green environment campaign since 2021, Yashil Makon, with the goal of planting 200 million trees annually in the next 5 years. The main objective of this initiative is to plant 1 billion trees and increase green coverage of rural areas by 30% by 2030. Your Excellencies, on behalf of delegation of Uzbekistan, let me express our support and commitment to work with international community on post-2020 global biodiversity framework. We look forward to continued collaboration with CBD Secretariat, UNEP and UN organizations to conserve and restore nature, building on shared success and work together towards 2030 and beyond. Thank you for your attention.
谢谢部长阁下，感谢您的发言。下面我邀请法国生态与团结化转型部长克里斯托弗·贝属阁下发言。在法国之后将是印度。贝属部长阁下，有请。
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Chers collègues, Mesdames, Messieurs. Le déclin de la biodiversité est sans précédent. La France, riche de sa biodiversité en métropole et en outre-mer, est consciente de sa responsabilité au niveau mondial. Pour lutter contre ce déclin alarmant, nous mettons en œuvre des politiques structurées et des objectifs chiffrés. 33% de notre territoire bénéficient d'un statut de protection. 200 espèces bénéficient de plans d'action dédiés. Un objectif de zéro artificialisation des terres à 2050 est inscrit dans la loi. 3,6 millions d'hectares de zones humides sont désormais protégés. Nous investissons au niveau national près de 2,5 milliards d'euros pour la biodiversité, auxquels s'ajouteront en 2023 2 milliards d'euros pour la transition écologique dans le cadre d'un fonds spécial. Nous visons également la suppression des dépenses publiques dommageables à la biodiversité et nous soutenons l'élaboration d'un cadre européen de rapportage pour que les entreprises et les institutions financières mesurent et rendent publics leurs impacts sur la biodiversité. C'est bien par l'association de tous les acteurs et de tous les pays que nous arriverons à protéger la biodiversité. C'est pourquoi la France souhaite un cadre mondial ambitieux, porteur d'objectifs chiffrés, doté d'un mécanisme de suivi robuste, qui devra être accompagné d'un paquet financier significatif, mobilisant des fonds publics, privés, domestiques et internationaux. La France agit concrètement au niveau international. Le président de la République, Emmanuel Macron, s'est récemment positionné contre toute exploitation des grands fonds marins et il a lancé une réflexion sur la manière de préserver les réserves vitales de carbone et de biodiversité. Pour encourager les pays à contribuer à l'objectif de 30% des terres et de 30% des mers à l'échelle mondiale d'ici 2030, nous avons lancé la coalition pour la haute ambition pour la nature et les peuples, qui réunit désormais 116 pays. Je vous annonce que cette puissante coalition va devenir plus opérationnelle puisqu'elle a décidé ce matin de se doter d'un secrétariat permanent pour accompagner les porteurs de projets d'aires protégées afin de réaliser leurs projets dans les meilleures conditions possibles. En matière d'appui financier, la France doublera ses financements internationaux en faveur de la biodiversité pour atteindre 1 milliard d'euros par an à compter de 2025. Nous invitons les autres pays à s'engager sur la même voie et nous demandons aux banques multilatérales de développement de faire de la biodiversité une de leurs priorités. Mesdames et messieurs, il ne nous reste plus que quelques jours pour faire de cette COP un succès. Vous pouvez compter sur la mobilisation totale de la France dans cette négociation pour parvenir à un résultat efficace et ambitieux.
谢谢部长阁下的发言。下面我邀请印度环境、森林和气候变化部部长布彭德拉亚达夫阁下发言。在印度之后是墨西哥。亚达夫部长阁下，有请。
Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we all acknowledge the credible action is the source of strength and optimism in facing all global challenges, including biodiversity. Despite India having 17% of the global population, but only 2.4% of the land area and only 4% of its water resources, we are forging ahead in our efforts. Our forest and tree cover is steadily rising together with our wildlife population. Definitive steps are being taken to return the iconic cheetah to Indian habitats. India has taken a quantum jump in the number of declared Ramsar sites to the current figure of 75. As a large developing country, our forest policy is challenging to implement, but our forest surveys are testimony to its success. India's balance sheet is implementing the HE target, is proactive and forward-looking, and India is on track to meeting its commitments. Similarly, our agriculture, as for other developing countries, is the source of life, livelihoods, and culture for hundreds of millions. Such essential support to vulnerable sections cannot be called subsidies and targeted for elimination. While they are being rationalized, biodiversity must be promoted through positive investment. Similarly, a numerical global target for pesticide reduction is unnecessary and must be left to countries to decide. India has taken numerous steps to keep invasive alien species at bay, but a numerical target is not feasible without the necessary baseline and relevant scientific evidence. Excellencies, the global biodiversity framework must be framed in the light of science and equity, and the sovereign right of nations over their resources as provided for in the Convention on Biodiversity. If climate is profoundly linked to biodiversity, then the principle of equity and common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities must equally apply to biodiversity. When nature itself is under stress because of the historical disproportionate and inequitous CHG emissions of the developed countries, nature-based solutions to global warming and other environmental challenges are not an answer without resolute action by developed countries to measure up to their historical and current responsibilities. Nature cannot protect if it is not itself protected. Nature is the victim of global warming and its proactive features can do little against unchecked temperature rise. We cannot only conserve, preserve or restore, we must also promote sustainable use, and it is in the context that Honorable Prime Minister of India, Shri Narendra Modi ji clarion call for a people movement centered on lifestyle for environment launched on 20th October 2022. Excellencies, the provision of the means of implementation must match our ambition. Only our source of funding remains the global environment facility that caters to multiple conventions. The value of biodiversity to humankind also lies in its economic dimension alongside the cultural and social sustainable use, and access and benefit sharing are the key to promoting biodiversity alongside the efforts to conserve, protect and restore. I reiterate that what is needed today is mindful and deliberate utilization instead of mindless and destructive consumption. In this context, our Honorable Prime Minister has launched the mission Life, which is the mass movement toward the environmentally conscious lifestyle. Embracing this, let us move forward toward the equitable and sustainable world by implementing the foundational principle of CBD, both in letter and spirit. It is in this spirit which has been captured so truly in the logo of India's G20 presidency, which calls for the one world, one family, or Vasudev Kutumbakam. Jai Hind.
谢谢亚达夫部长阁下，感谢您的发言。现在我邀请墨西哥多边关系和人权事务副部长玛莎德尔加多佩拉尔格阁下发言。在墨西哥之后将是克罗地亚。佩拉尔塔部长阁下有请。
Excelencias, altas autoridades y colegas del mundo, nos encontramos en un momento crucial de definición para el futuro de la biodiversidad del planeta y también de nuestra existencia misma. México, como parte de los países megadiversos que albergamos más del 70% de la biodiversidad global, tiene la responsabilidad de contribuir a resguardar el patrimonio biocultural y los conocimientos milenarios de los pueblos indígenas. Por ello, México impulsa la adopción de un marco mundial de la biodiversidad que reconozca el derecho humano a un medio ambiente limpio, saludable y sostenible, y que de manera transversal tenga un enfoque de derechos humanos, equidad intergeneracional y respete los derechos de los pueblos indígenas y comunidades locales, garantizando su participación plena y efectiva. Asimismo, en línea con nuestra política exterior feminista, México es un firme proponente de la Meta 22 para contar con un marco género responsivo. Como parte de la coalición de alta ambición, México expresa su compromiso con la meta global de proteger al menos 30% de la tierra y océanos del planeta para el año 2030. Subrayando la relevancia de transitar hacia una economía oceánica sostenible para evitar el uso indebido y la sobreexplotación de nuestros océanos. Es el momento de optimizar los recursos que tenemos y encontrar soluciones. Reconociendo las diferentes capacidades nacionales, es menester señalar que solo podrán alcanzarse las metas ambiciosas si se garantizan los medios de implementación suficientes, accesibles, innovadores y provenientes de todas las fuentes públicas y privadas. Con este objetivo en mente, Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, México y Perú hemos presentado una propuesta para fortalecer y reformar el Fondo para el Medio Ambiente Mundial, GEF, incluyendo la creación de un Trust Fund bajo el GEF dedicado a la implementación del marco post-2020 que permita canalizar de manera ágil recursos de todas las fuentes. México considera importante promover incentivos positivos e impulsar proyectos multifocales que consideren cobeneficios para enfrentar las múltiples crisis ambientales de cambio climático, pérdida de la biodiversidad, desertificación y contaminación. de tal forma que México promueve las sinergias entre las distintas convenciones ambientales, particularmente entre las 3 de Río, también para fortalecer la seguridad hídrica y alimentaria en línea con los objetivos de la Agenda 2030 para el Desarrollo Sostenible. Sobre los recursos genéticos físicos, para México estos están intrínsecamente relacionados con las secuencias digitales. Defendamos enfáticamente las provisiones para el fortalecimiento del consentimiento libre, pleno e informado. En cuanto a las prácticas agroecológicas que aumentan la productividad, deben suceder de manera armónica con la naturaleza y sin permitir la introducción y el uso de semillas transgénicas. Finalmente, México refrenda su compromiso con el multilateralismo y hace un llamado a la flexibilidad de todas las partes para poder adoptar un marco mundial post-2020 ambicioso en esta 15ª Conferencia de las Partes de Biodiversidad. Muchas gracias.
感谢部长阁下的发言。下面我邀请克罗地亚国务秘书赫沃耶·博亚诺维奇阁下发言。在克罗地亚之后将是多哥。克罗地亚部长阁下有请。
Distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to express words of gratitude to our hosts for organizing this historical event. It's my great honor and privilege to be present here in Montreal. Today, we live in a time when biodiversity conservation and green policies are no longer a matter of choice, of luxury. They are the only path we should follow. The cost of not doing so will be immeasurably greater. To step up on the right track for biodiversity conservation, COP needs to set the global biodiversity framework that will be driving force behind transformative change. Involvement of all relevant actors at all levels is indecisive in this process. This transition requires close cooperation between policymakers, academia, relevant data, timely models, and a set of concrete measures for decision makers. Therefore, Croatia will establish a national center for climate and ecological transition as a center of expertise. Biodiversity and climate crises are closely related. Nature-based solutions fostering biodiversity play an important role in climate change mitigation and adaptation. That's why Croatia's approach will be nature-based solution first. In Croatia, we contribute significantly to reaching 30 by 30 target on land and sea. We have already protected more than 38 of our land. In the upcoming period, Croatia intends to contribute to the global goal by protecting 30% of maritime area within national jurisdiction. Failure to meet biodiversity targets is not only due to lack of nature conservation measures, but rather due to increasing pressures on environment. Croatia supports the full integration of biodiversity into all relevant sectoral policies. Mainstreaming biodiversity-friendly solution in bilateral ODA throughout all productive sectors is one of the key steps towards biodiversity neutral or positive impacts. Given the need for an ambitious, comprehensive, and transformative post-2020 GPF, it's vital to secure sufficient financing from all sources. Great responsibility lies with the business sector as well. Mere fact that so many are present here at COP-15 shows their commitment. We need businesses accountable for the impact on society and economy that benefits people and the environment. Neither sooner nor later, but now, the world deserves a global biodiversity framework that outlines a clear and predictable path towards transformative edge. I wish to thank you for all constructive work and invite you to support resolute and ambitious outcome of this meeting. Thank you.
谢谢部长阁下，感谢您。下面呢，我邀请多哥环境和森林资源部秘书长 奥夫科普、迪米祖阁下发言。在多哥之后是哈萨克斯坦。迪米祖秘书长阁下有请。
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Mesdames et Messieurs les ministres, distingués délégués, le gouvernement togolais félicite la République populaire de Chine pour la parfaite organisation de cette conférence et par la même occasion remercie le gouvernement du Canada pour toutes les facilités offertes pour l'accueil des délégations et la tenue de la conférence sur son territoire. Le Togo apprécie tous les efforts du secrétariat exécutif de la Convention et l'ensemble des partenaires qui accompagnent les pays dans la réalisation des actions permettant de freiner la perte continue de la diversité biologique dans le monde. Le thème de ce segment ministériel, intitulé « Vers une civilisation écologique, construire un avenir partagé pour toute vie sur Terre », interpelle les premiers responsables des institutions internationales, mais surtout nationales, sur la nécessité de tout mettre en œuvre pour la réalisation de la vision 2050 des Nations Unies, celle de vivre en harmonie avec la nature. En vue de contribuer à la mise en œuvre du cadre mondial, le Togo a exprimé de grandes ambitions, celle de mettre en terre 1 milliard de plants, de restaurer 1,4 million d'hectares de paysages forestiers dégradés et d'étendre son couvert forestier à plus de 25% du territoire national à l'horizon 2030. En outre, il a inscrit parmi les priorités nationales l'adoption de nouvelles lois spécifiques sur la protection des espèces menacées d'extinction, le changement climatique et les aires protégées, y compris les aires marines protégées. Ces différents engagements constituent les piliers sur lesquels le Togo entend développer et orienter les investissements internes et externes en vue de contribuer à l'effort global de mise en œuvre du cadre mondial de la biodiversité pour l'après 2020. Vous constatez aisément que les ambitions et la volonté politique existent, mais le X, c'est la mobilisation des ressources. C'est pourquoi, Monsieur le Président, se fondant sur la position du groupe africain, le Togo s'est fait sienne la vision 2050 des Nations Unies, ainsi que la déclaration de Kunming sur la civilisation écologique et souhaite vivement qu'une attention particulière soit accordée à la question de création d'un fonds dédié à la biodiversité assorti d'un mécanisme solide de son financement à travers l'utilisation des ressources génétiques ainsi que de l'information du séquençage numérique. Je vous remercie.
感谢部长阁下的发言。下面我邀请哈萨克斯坦生态地质和自然资源部副部长阿利亚·沙拉贝科娃阁下发言。在哈萨克斯坦之后将是塞尔维亚。沙拉贝科娃部长阁下有请。
Thank you. Distinguished colleagues, we express our gratitude to the government of China to organize the CBD COP-15 and the government of Canada to host it. Our presence here in this intervention is intended to confirm that the government of Kazakhstan remains a committed signatory to the Convention on Biological Diversity and recognizes the urgency of addressing the biodiversity crisis. Kazakh people have an ancient affinity with the natural world dating back to our nomadic origins. Now we are developing modern approaches to conserve and restore our rich natural heritage and maintain its central part in Kazakhstan's culture. Since our independence in 1991, we have created a strong framework of legislation to conserve and restore biodiversity. We have increased our state-protected areas to cover more than 10% of our territory. We are fully committed to expanding our protected areas network significantly. Our evidence-based decisions will focus on securing vital steppe grasslands, freshwater, desert ecosystems to maintain their biodiversity, enable recovery of iconic species, and ensure connectivity that benefits migratory species on land, across flyways, and along swimways by collaborating actively with those countries with whom we share nature. We have achieved our greatest success so far with Saiga antelope, up from less than 50,000 adults in 2007 to over 1.3 million this year. We warmly welcome a recent recognition by the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration of our Altin Dala Conservation Partnership. However, this is only the beginning. We are forming bold plans to restore or reintroduce a series of other iconic species whose populations were depleted or destroyed historically. Our ambitions will be framed within our long-awaited National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan in 2025. We also signed up to the 10-point plan for financing biodiversity launched by the government of the United Kingdom as we face challenges in securing innovative long-term financing for our integrated biodiversity conservation efforts, and also in ensuring that the livelihood of rural communities also benefit equitably as a result of biodiversity conservation. Our approach is to use connections and synergy between conventions to address the impacts of climate change, desertification, and the international illegal wildlife trade. To achieve these aims, we remain open for collaborations across sectors and across geography, listening to stakeholders and experts from local to global levels to make our contributions to deliver what must be a truly ambitious post-2020 global biodiversity framework. Thank you.
谢谢部长阁下的发言。现在我想邀请塞尔维亚环境保护部国务秘书沙拉·帕夫科夫阁下发言。在塞尔维亚之后是特立尼达和多巴哥。帕夫科夫阁下有请。
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Your Excellency, Ministers, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. Let me first extend my sincere gratitude to our hosts, the Government of the People's Republic of China, the Government of Canada, the Government of Quebec, the cities of Kunming and Montreal, and their people. I would like to use this opportunity to confirm that Serbia strongly supports an ambitious global biodiversity framework and the commitments from the Kunming Declaration. We appreciate all the efforts that have been made to finalize negotiations and prepare the GBF for adoption at this meeting. A significant progress has been made since the regional consultations on the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework for CE region held in Serbia in 2019. In order to meet the objectives of the Convention at the historical turning point, we must conserve, restore, and sustainably use the element of the biodiversity. We must also quantify their value and develop indicators that will allow us to establish commitments and assess the implementation of such commitments. The eyes of the world are on us. We must mobilize all available resources in order to fulfill the 2030 mission and achieve the 2030 targets toward the 2050 goals and vision for biodiversity. It will otherwise be very difficult for us as a global community to reach the targets we have set to eradicate poverty, address climate change impacts, and meet all other objectives of the 2030 development agenda. I'm standing here with you today confident that we can deliver an ambitious global biodiversity framework that will put nature on the path to recovery and safeguard our irreplaceable biodiversity for generations to come. During the past period, significant effort was invested in developing nature protection policies in the Republic of Serbia. New protected areas were declared, thus increasing the territory under protection by almost 8%, while the ecological networks cover 20% of the territory. We are ready to update the nature protection program of the Republic of Serbia in accordance with the GBF. Since the regional cooperation plays a vital role for implementation of global biodiversity commitments, Serbia actively participates in the work of the Regional Biodiversity Task Force for Southeast Europe, which is in charge of implementing the biodiversity pillar of the Green Agenda for the Western Balkans. I would also use this opportunity to proudly announce that next year our country will host COP-7 of the Carpathian Convention. In conclusion, we call for additional efforts to secure means of implementation for all parties that had difficulties in financing such activities, and for further enhancement of cooperation at all levels, including the existing regional and sub-regional cooperation mechanisms. The global efforts we make are proof of our readiness to accomplish the vision of living in harmony with nature by 2050. Thank you.
谢谢国务秘书阁下的发言。现在呢，我邀请特立尼达和多巴哥规划和发展部副常务秘书里克·贾维德·阿里阁下发言，之后是希腊。阿里常务秘书阁下，有请。
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Distinguished delegates, the government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago echoes the gratitude expressed by other nations in thanking the People's Republic of China for its leadership in these critical negotiations of global significance. I also take this opportunity to thank the Government of Canada for its gracious hospitality and providing these excellent meeting facilities. Trinidad and Tobago is a twin island state situate at the southern end of the Caribbean chain of islands. Our biota and terrestrial habitats reflect the ecology of equatorial South America and therefore has a high species diversity to surface area ratio. As such, environmental management and conservation are key priorities of the government, and this is reflected in our national development strategy. The global community, particularly small island developing states like Trinidad and Tobago, has faced its fair share of challenges in reversing biodiversity loss. Mr. President, we are at a critical juncture that will determine the fate of this planet and the life it sustains. Trinidad and Tobago recognizes the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, GBF, is a crucial avenue to foster collaboration and provide a long-term roadmap for action to achieve the 2050 vision of living in harmony with nature. I urge parties to continue working assiduously toward ensuring that the Global Biodiversity Framework targets are underpinned by science, are measurable, and allow for implementation in its entirety. Of particular importance to all small island developing states is closing the global biodiversity finance gap and achieving a comprehensive, ambitious, and just global biodiversity framework. This shall require increased financial resources from all sources and from parties. In Trinidad and Tobago, the Green Fund was established as our flagship national environmental fund that provides financial assistance to eligible community groups and organizations for activities related to reforestation, remediation, environmental education, and public awareness of environmental issues and conservation of the environment. The Green Fund is capitalized by a Green Fund levy of 0.3% on all gross sales of all receipts of companies operating in Trinidad and Tobago. And to date, over $55 million in grant funding has been dispersed to eligible entities. Accordingly, this fund remains available to local entities to access funding toward the implementation of projects in alignment with the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. Mr. President, as members of the High Ambition Coalition and the Global Ocean Alliance, Trinidad and Tobago supports area-based conservation measures in alignment with the 30 by 30 target and is committed to the successful implementation of this ambitious target, having already made significant strides in the protection and management of our land space. Additionally, our country has established its biodiversity information system, which serves as a core repository of all biodiversity data and information. This will support informed decision-making for sustainable use of the country's biological resources. Further, in January 2023, the country will commence a rapid review of its National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan to ensure its alignment with the GBF goals and targets. In conclusion, Mr. President, as we move forward, Trinidad and Tobago recognizes that a healthy environment redounds to a healthy and productive citizenry. We hope that all the parties heed this call to action articulated in the Global Biodiversity Framework, and also hope that it shall continue to catalyze global efforts towards achieving the vision of living in harmony with nature. I thank you.
谢谢常务秘书阁下的发言。Sorry， 下面我想邀请希腊环境与能源部副部长乔治亚斯·阿米拉斯阁下发言。在希腊之后将是意大利。阿米拉斯部长阁下有请。
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, dear colleagues, firstly allow me to thank the government of People of China for organizing this conference, and of course our Canadian hosts for their warm hospitality despite the snow outside. We are convening these days here in Montreal to adopt the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, reflecting that mankind must seriously deal with biodiversity loss in the years to come. Greece steadily supports the 2050 vision for biodiversity and the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and its 17 goals, in particular SDG 15, through several actions and measures. We have committed to revising our national biodiversity strategy and action plan in 2023 in order to comply with the post-2020 GBF and the European Biodiversity Strategy for 2030, aligned with our national strategy on climate change adaptation, the National Forest Strategy, as well as the recently adopted National Reforestation Plan aiming to plant 20 million trees by 2026. As part of our effort to protect biodiversity, Greece becomes the first country in Europe to apply a special strict status to avoid ecosystem fragmentation for 8 so far significant mountains, the untrodden mountains, by forbidding the construction of any artificial surface or road. We are setting the same protection status for at least 1,000 unspoiled beaches. At the same time, Greece has recently drawn up its first national catalogue for invasive species, which will lead to the formulation of the related management plans. As for our ambitious commitments by 2030, let me provide some examples. We commit to legally protect 30% of our territory through well-managed protected areas and set 1/3 of them under strict protection. We also commit to the prohibition of fishing over 10% of Greek seas that will be no-take reserves, while we are committed to reduce by 50% marine plastic litter and by 30% microplastics released in the marine environment. Global cooperation and strict protection of biodiversity are crucial to tackle climate crisis. Greece, as a contracting party to numerous international or European environmental conventions, and also with its own initiatives, carries out both. Thank you very much.
谢谢部长阁下，感谢您的发言。下面我邀请意大利环境与能源安全部副部长凡尼亚·加瓦阁下发言。 之后是葡萄牙，加瓦部长阁下有请。
Thank you. Distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I extend my warm greetings to all the participants. On behalf of the Italian government, I wish to express our deepest appreciation to the government of People's Republic of China and thanks the governments of Canada and Quebec for welcoming us. I also thank the CBS Secretariat for its hard work. Today, we have a unique opportunity to invest on the behalf of our planet and put people and nature at the very heart of our political agenda. Thanks to our collective efforts, we have now the chance to adopt an ambitious post-2020 global biodiversity framework with measurable goals and targets that will foster further action in halting and reversing biodiversity loss, and preserve and enhance the health of ecosystems. Through the ZBF, we will commit to completely address the drivers of ecosystems degradation, as well as species extinction, and give rise to transformative actions by mainstreaming biodiversity across sectors. In this context, nature-based solutions for climate change, mitigation and adaptation are crucial, as well as the conservation and restoration of marine and coastal biodiversity. Italy, in particular, being part of the High Ambition Coalition for People and Nature, aims to conserve at least 30% of its land and water by 2030, and is convinced we all need to be united to pursue this goal at the global level. Italy is committed to mobilize resources from all sources while enhancing efficiency of available resources. To close the global funding gap for biodiversity, it is needed that all parties together put efforts in mobilizing resources from all sources, domestic, international, public and private. And so, ladies and gentlemen, now is the time to act. We do not want to fail. Italy will strive for an adoption of ambition post-2020 ZBF to preserve nature for its intrinsic value as our common and fundamental heritage and build a sustainable, resilient, inclusive and fair world to hand over to our present and future generation. Thank you.
谢谢部长阁下的发言。现在我请葡萄牙自然保护和林业国务秘书乔保罗·卡塔里诺阁下发言。在葡萄牙之后将是南苏丹。卡塔里诺国务秘书阁下有请。
Sua Excelência, Ministro da Ecologia e Meio Ambiente da China, Sua Excelência, Secretário Executivo da Convenção sobre a Biodiversidade Biológica, ilustres ministros, chefes de delegação e delegados, minhas senhoras e meus senhores. São tempos desafiantes os que vivemos. O mundo enfrenta uma tripla ameaça: a perda de biodiversidade e a mudança climática, a par do aumento dos níveis de poluição, são mesmo um dos maiores desafios do século XXI. Para deter e reverter a perda de biodiversidade, precisamos de mudar a nossa relação com a natureza e começar uma missão da paz com o nosso planeta. Minhas senhoras e meus senhores, Portugal é um país com uma cultura secular que abriu as fronteiras do mundo e é mesmo rica em biodiversidade. Situa-se entre 3 regiões biogeográficas ricas em biodiversidade: o Atlântico, o Mediterrâneo e a Macaronésia, onde vivem mais de 35 mil espécies de animais e plantas, ou seja, 22% de todas as espécies descritas na Europa e 2% a nível mundial. Portugal foi pioneiro ao assumir o compromisso da neutralidade carbónica até 2050. Pretende também alcançar 80% de energias renováveis na produção de eletricidade já em 2026. A par destes compromissos, ambiciona ter uma política determinada em matéria de biodiversidade. Foi pioneiro na sua política pública, impondo desde os anos 70 do século passado a criação de parques e reservas naturais que fez toda a diferença no que é hoje o património natural português. Na última década, numa cooperação entre Portugal e Espanha, foi possível a recuperação do lince ibérico, um dos felinos mais ameaçados do mundo. Nos últimos anos foram desenvolvidos projetos de restauro e recuperação de habitats naturais em 19 áreas protegidas e está em curso um projeto de pagamento dos serviços de ecossistemas. Recentemente foi lançado o Programa Nacional de Transformação da Paisagem com a ambição de valorizar o capital natural e prevenir os incêndios rurais, uma das maiores ameaças à biodiversidade portuguesa. É neste contexto que Portugal, em 2023, irá organizar a 8ª Conferência Internacional sobre Fogos Rurais, para a qual estão todos desde já convidados. Já em 2022, Portugal criou a maior área marinha protegida do Atlântico Norte, com quase 3.000 quilómetros de área. Minhas senhoras e meus senhores, Portugal já assumiu perante os restantes partes desta conferência o seu compromisso de proteger 30% de terra e do mar até 2030. Nesse sentido, está a trabalhar na criação de novas áreas protegidas na sua rede nacional no âmbito dos diversos habitats. É membro da Coligação de Elevada Ambição para a Natureza e as Pessoas, da Aliança Global para os Oceanos, do Grupo de Líderes Azuis e assumiu, nestes dias, o Estatuto de Amigo da Coligação do Small Island Developing States pela Natureza. Hoje, perante vós, nesta cimeira, Portugal está fortemente empenhado em contribuir para a adoção do quadro legal da biodiversidade pós-2022. É nossa convicção que estamos perante uma oportunidade premente para definir compromissos decisivos em matéria de biodiversidade mundial. É construir em conjunto, como humanidade, o caminho para a recuperação da nossa natureza. Muito obrigado.
谢谢国务秘书阁下的发言。现在我请南苏丹环境部副部长约束夫阿菲罗巴特尔阁下发言。南苏丹之后将是罗马尼亚。巴特尔部长阁下，有请。
Mr. President, Excellencies, Ministers, Heads of Delegation, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, South Sudan would like to commend the excellent stewardship of this COP by the People's Republic of China and also the government and people of Canada for hosting this conference in this beautiful city of Montreal and for the excellent hospitality accorded to my delegation. Mr. President, South Sudan is endued with vast variety of ecosystems, ranging from the largest wetland in Africa, which is the Sud, the forest, savanna, mountain, grasslands, and semi-desert. The Sud wetland supports one of the world's greatest mammalian migration of the Tiang and white-eared kob across the vast landscape of South Sudan, and a critical global migratory bird flyway convergence point. The ecosystems, their genetic resources, and associated traditional knowledge support the livelihoods of many populations in the country and contribute to the global environmental benefits. But these ecosystems are under threat from illegal logging, poaching, biopiracy, invasive alien species, climate change, unsustainable exploitation, land use changes, and conversion, dredging, pollution, natural disasters, among others. To address some of these challenges, South Sudan Cabinet approved an environmental policy in 2015, which enabled the accession to the Convention of Biological Diversity in 2014, and became the 194th member and is in the process of acceding to the Nagoya and the Cartagena protocols, among other MEAs. The country is in the process of finalizing an Environmental Management Act, which will be aligned with the provisions of the new biodiversity framework. It is worth noting that, guided by the NBSAP, The Minister of Environment and Forestry dedicated the GEF 6, 7, and 8 envelopes to address issues of biodiversity with emphasis on illegal wildlife trade and protected area management effectiveness. Accession to the Nagoya Protocol, awareness and capacity building, sustainable approaches in the Imatong ecosystems. The implementation of the MBSAP 2018 was only centered around resources from the Global Environment Facility, which is fit for purpose but very competitive, especially for the Nagoya and the Cartagena protocols. South Sudan supports a draft decision to be adopted on biosafety and specifically on the living modified organisms, being a landlocked country. To conclude, Mr. President, the Intergovernment Panel on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services report shows that science, policy, and practice are inseparable, and the drivers of biodiversity loss are crystal clear, and we cannot wait to act to reverse the trend. After this, global biodiversity framework adaptation is action, and action cannot happen without resources, capacity building, and technical cooperation to ensure we live in harmony with nature, and the time is now. Thank you for listening.
谢谢部长阁下的发言。现在我邀请罗马尼亚环境、水和森林部国务秘书约努索林班丘阁下发言。在罗马尼亚之后将是圣吉兹和尼维斯班丘国务秘书阁下，有请。
Your Excellency, distinguished ministers and delegates, dear colleagues, please allow me to begin by thanking the CBD Secretariat for all the preparation involved for convening this high-level segment, a context which allows sharing our ambitions and views to build a shared future in the margins of the post-2020 global biodiversity framework. Biodiversity loss, land and ocean degradation, pollution, resource depletion, and climate change are accelerating at an unprecedented rate. The COVID-19 pandemic has shown us the necessity to take effective and urgent action to halt the loss of biodiversity and to ensure resilient ecosystems. It also reflects the fact that the risk of the occurrence and spread of infectious diseases is increasing due to the destruction of nature. Therefore, protecting and restoring biodiversity and the proper functioning of ecosystems are essential to enlarge our resilience and prevent the emergence and spread of diseases in the future. Romania, as a country with exceptional biodiversity, strongly supports an ambitious and implementable global framework aiming to put biodiversity on a path to recovery for the benefit of our planet and for us all. Also, Romania's government has committed to expand the area of strict protection in the national parks and to implement in the best possible way the EU Biodiversity Strategy for 2030. An ambitious post-2030 biodiversity framework is needed, and this requires a significant shift away from business as usual and a focus on synergies. There is growing consensus that we need to rely more on sustainable solutions that are in synergy with nature and supported by local communities. Achieving an ambitious post-2020 global biodiversity framework will require greater cooperation with international partners, increased support, significant funding, and phasing out biodiversity harmful subsidies. Everyone needs to be on board to achieve urgently the needed transformative change. Successful implementation of the new framework is critical for achieving the 2050 vision on living in harmony with nature. Ambitious targets are important, but they must be followed up with effective actions that will translate into improvements on the ground, hand in hand with the close monitoring. Thank you.
谢谢部长阁下，感谢你给我们节约了30秒。下面我邀请 圣基兹和尼维斯环境部常务秘书沙朗拉坦阁下。之后是乌干达。拉坦常务秘书阁下，有请。
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Excellencies, with distinct honor, I address this plenary on behalf of the government of St. Kitts and Nevis. We express our deepest appreciation to the government of the People's Republic of China for effectively presiding over the COP for the past 4 years, and to the government of Canada for so graciously and ably hosting this important biodiversity conference. Like many of you here, St. Kitts and Nevis came to COP-15 ready to forge an ambitious and transformative post-2020 global biodiversity framework at the conclusion of this critical meeting. We welcome the Kunming Declaration as a robust platform that can drive political impetus towards the development of a strong and effective strategic framework. Mr. President, the global scientific evidence is overwhelmingly clear that the natural capital that our economies so heavily depend on has been declining at an alarming rate. An urgent action to restore and safeguard biodiversity is required now. Regrettably, despite the urgency of now, there remain significant resource and capacity gaps that limit effective action. Of course, the government of St. Kitts and Nevis joins with the other countries to support an implementation of ambitious and effective resource mobilization and capacity building strategies that are central to achieving the targets articulated in the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. We believe that policy coherence, partnerships, and synergies at all levels are essential for successfully developing the GBF. We affirm our commitment to applying a multi-sectoral approach to scaling up national conservation actions, including increasing our protected terrestrial system from 22.5% to 28% by 2025. Our recent stocktake underscored the criticality of an all-of-society approach to support the implementation of our National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan. St. Kitts and Nevis remain deeply committed. To this end, our newly elected Prime Minister, the Honorable Dr. Terence Drew, has declared St. Kitts and Nevis as the first sustainable small island state. He is ably supported by our Minister, the Honorable Dr. Joya Clark, and the Minister of Energy, the Honorable Conwys Maynard. To add to that, we also have our Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Right Honorable Dr. Denzel Douglas. We firmly believe that this interministerial synergy will drive the impetus of investment and opportunities to transform our 104 square mile federation. We intend to promote understanding, build consensus, and leverage opportunities around 5 pillars: energy, water, food security, sustainable industries, and technology. Friends, St. Kitts and Nevis is strengthening its resolve to pursue its strategic vision, to survive and to thrive. We welcome your cooperation, guidance, and assistance as we help each other to respond to the looming triple planetary crisis. Together, we can win. Thank you for your invitation, and thank you for your attention.
谢谢常务秘书阁下的发言。现在我邀请乌干达环境国务部长 比亚特利斯·阿蒂姆·奥德旺阁下发言。在乌干达之后，将是波斯尼亚和塞戈维纳。有请奥德旺部长阁下。
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, Uganda would like to congratulate People's Republic of China and the Government of Canada and the Secretariat of CBD for the excellent arrangements towards hosting of COP-15. I wish also to recognize the efforts of the Republic of Uganda and the Government of Canada in co-chairing the open-ended working group to facilitate development of an ambitious post-2020 biodiversity framework. Uganda is fully committed to ensuring a successful COP-15 with a global biodiversity framework that ensures harmonious coexistence between people and nature through sustainable socio-economic transformation of our societies, especially the local communities that depend on biodiversity. Uganda remains committed to the goals, ideals, and aspirations of the Convention, which are conservation of biological diversity, sustainable use of its components, and fair and equitable sharing of the benefits arising from utilization of the genetic resources. Any resolutions or decisions that deviate off the three ideals of the Convention would definitely not be supported by Uganda. Distinguished delegates, Uganda aligns herself to the position of Africa and other like-minded states in calling for a global biodiversity framework that is fully aligned to the Convention objectives. A framework that is ambitious but realistic and implementable, cognizant of the national capabilities and circumstances, the right to development, as well as equitable sharing of derivatives of genetic resources, including digital sequence information. We call upon all parties to pay particular attention to the means of implementation for the global biodiversity framework so that we do not get a beautiful document that will not make meaningful change to the biodiversity situation on ground. Finally, Uganda has already developed a 10-year national ecosystem restoration plan and integrated the current national biodiversity strategy and action plan into the national development plan, and all the key sectors are already mainstreamed. These efforts demonstrate the commitment of the political leadership of the government of Uganda in implementation of the Convention. Thank you, Mr. President.
谢谢部长阁下的发言。现在，我邀请波斯尼亚和黑塞哥维那对外贸易和经济关系助理部长米尔扎瓦吉阁下发言，之后是巴西。瓦吉部长阁下，有请。
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me to express my gratitude to the governments of China and Canada for their dedicated work to ensure a successful COP here in beautiful Montreal. Bosnia and Herzegovina is dedicated to the adoption and implementation of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework as a new global decision on joint action to preserve species, ecosystem functions and services on which we depend. Although there is a concern for ambition level, Bosnia and Herzegovina stands behind the concept of each target, goal, mission, and vision of GBF. We are actively involved in the preparation of the framework for biodiversity, both through the work of the various bodies of the Convention, as well as through expert work in the preparation of indicators. We consider an application of indicators in reporting to be demanding, but necessary in the implementation of the objectives of the Convention. Up to now, Bosnia and Herzegovina have submitted all 6 regular reports to the Convention and will endeavor to further carry out the reporting obligation on a regular basis. After the submission of the last report, there are significant developments related to the implementation of the Convention in our country. On the path of its integration into the EU, Bosnia and Herzegovina overcomes barriers, many of which are related to issues of conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity and natural resources. One of the 6 Western Balkan countries, Bosnia and Herzegovina is signatory of Sofia Declaration supporting the Green Agenda for Western Balkans, which addresses climate and biodiversity crisis, pollution and other direct drivers of healthy environment, aiming for sustainable food and energy production system and circular economy development. With all efforts to join the EU, Bosnia and Herzegovina follows EU initiatives and undertakes activities in order to align the legal and institutional framework according to EU requirements. Bosnia and Herzegovina is in the process of adopting the State Environmental Strategy, ESAP 2030+, which was prepared with significant help from SIDA, Sweden. A special part of this strategy is dedicated to the conservation of biological and landscape diversity, in which, as one of the priorities, the need to revise the NBSAP in accordance with the post-2020 GBF is recognized. Other ESAP priorities are complementary to those GBF requirements that are already known, such as recognition of OECD areas and mainstreaming. We consider the building of institutional capacities and the development of a permanent dialogue between the scientific community and decision makers to be particularly important priorities. As for the implementation of the last mentioned priority, Bosnia and Herzegovina, with the kind help of IKI, Germany, and WCMC, is conducting a national ecosystem assessment. Through this process, we strive to improve the quality of decisions that affect the state of nature, but also to better focus our research in the direction of social needs. Last but not least, we do recognize the challenges of GBF implementation, such technical and human capacities and financial resources, complex institutional organization in the country, availability of biodiversity data, and lack of political will with economy sectors to prioritize biodiversity in their programs and policies. However, with an understanding of the global urgent situation, Bosnia and Herzegovina stands ready to increase efforts in implementation of objectives of conventions through new framework. Thank you very much.
谢谢瓦吉部长阁下的发言。下面我邀请巴西环境部副部长朱莉梅西亚斯阁下发言，之后将是韩国。梅西亚斯部长阁下，有请。
Thank you, Chair. I speak on behalf of the Minister of Environment of Brazil, Mr. Joaquim Leite. Mr. President, authorities present, guests, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank the Chinese presidency for guiding us during this COP and express Brazil's full support to your leadership. As the most mega-diverse country, home to 20 of the world's biodiversity, Brazil is a fundamental part of the solution to health and reserve the global loss of biodiversity. COP-15 is a once-in-a-decade opportunity to reflect upon the implementation of the Convention and to promote its 3 pillars in a mutually supportive and balanced manner. As we move towards the conclusion of this COP, our effort to finalize the GBF must be guided by a renewed sense of international cooperation and solidarity, the same spirit that paved the way for the adoption of the Convention on Biological Diversity 30 years ago. The persistent inequalities among development and developing countries are a stark reminder that our efforts to protect biodiversity must go hand in hand with equally ambitious commitments to support the Global South. Brazil is fully committed to ambitious conservation and restoration targets to be a practical solution to the biodiversity loss worldwide. We watch our ambition with a pinch of reality. Our targets must be achievable in order to be more than strong words in a paper. Brazil is also aware that the best way to protect nature is to address people's social vulnerability
and support sustainable livelihoods by recognizing and respecting the traditional knowledges of indigenous peoples and the local communities. Mr. Chair, therefore, for truly ambitious, GBF must guarantee a new additional financial resources, capacity building, technical and scientific cooperation, and technology transfers to support developing countries. Therefore, the developing countries will undertake to fulfill the goals and the targets to the post-2020 GBF must be equally based on a robust set of support mechanisms, including a dedicated global biodiversity fund, innovative financial instruments such as payments for ecosystem service, and multilateral mechanisms for benefit sharing arising from the DSI use. We need houses, cities, roads, railroads, and farms, but we also need to protect the biodiversity, forests, and seas. Brazil is an excellent example of this, with 66% of its native forests and 30% of its vast sea area protected, aligned with a tropical agriculture that is a record-breaking in food production. The result of modern and efficient techniques that protects the soil and the fixed carbon from the atmosphere in the production process, and the protection of native vegetation within private properties ranging from 20% to 18%. The results of this conference should bring social, economic, environmental benefits for all countries, in particular developing countries and especially the mega-diverse countries. Mr. Chair, Brazil is confident that the Chinese presidency will steer us towards the necessary spirit of solidarity to enable a successful and archivable post-2020 GBF with the equal communities for all parties. Thank you.
谢谢部长阁下，感谢您的发言。下面我邀请韩国环境部自然保护局局长金忠烈阁下发言。在韩国之后将是卡塔尔。金忠烈局长阁下，有请。
Thank you, Chair. Mr. President, Excellencies, distinguished delegate, the biodiversity loss is accelerating at an unprecedented rate. It poses great threat to the humanity on par with the climate crisis. To ignite global level actions to stop the biodiversity crisis, just as global climate actions, COP-15 needs to adopt an ambitious global framework that will help the world take one significant step to conserve biodiversity and ecosystems. I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to the government of China and Canada and the Secretariat for their dedicated effort to prepare this long-awaited historic event. The Republic of Korea stands ready to join the global commitment to halt the loss of biodiversity. Our effort for the biodiversity conservation as a national agenda include promoting ecosystem service payment system, expanding protected area, and identifying OECMs, increasing ecological areas through restoration, restoring endangered species, and promoting policies for wildlife inspection and enhanced disease controls. As the president of COP-12, the Republic of Korea is striving to live up to that expectation. In order to contribute to implementing of the post-2020 GBF, we will continue to support various initiatives under the Convention on Biodiversity Dialogue, Forest Ecosystem Restoration, and Sustainable Oceans. We also plan to increase the green ODAs by 2025 to above OECD average to identify and facilitate projects to respond to the climate and biodiversity crisis. We will contribute to the global effort by mobilizing domestic resources and aligning financial flows with biodiversity through a new MB Shop. We will also continue to work with our partners to conserve biodiversity and share our knowledge and experience with the global community. For instance, we held IUCN Leaders Forum this October in Jeju, where global leaders discussed building nature-positive economies and societies. We also processing establishment of global research and training center on internationally designated areas under the auspices of UNESCO. Excellence, over the last 4 years, we have had very difficult negotiations. We are on the verge of adopting a new global biodiversity framework. Let us be united in our will to protect the earth. Let us adopt and start implementing this GBF after adoption after this meeting. Thank you.
谢谢金正烈局长阁下的发言。现在我邀请卡塔尔驻加拿大大使哈利德·本·拉希德·曼苏里阁下发言，之后是蒙古。曼苏里大使阁下有请。
هلو بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الشكر موصول للصين وكندا والمنظمات الدولية ذات الصلة والأمانة العامة لبرنامج الأمم المتحدة الإنمائي. السيدات والسادة، لا يخفى على الجميع الدور المهم لبرنامج الأمم المتحدة الإنمائي في مساعدة البلدان لتحقيق أهداف التنمية المستدامة للحد من خطر تدهور التنوع البيولوجي وحماية الأنظمة الحيوية من التدهور. ودولة قطر تضع نصب أعينها تطبيق استراتيجية الاستدامة الدائمة في جميع مشاريعها وخططها الحالية والمستقبلية، والذي انعكس ذلك وبكل وضوح خلال استضافتها لنسخة استثنائية من كأس العالم صديقة للبيئة. فكان الحرص على معالجة المخلفات الناتجة من فعاليات المونديال على نحو يحقق طموح الدولة في تحقيق أول نسخة مونديالية لكأس العالم خالية من الكربون. وهذه ليست التجربة الأولى، بل سبقتها تجربة ناجحة أخرى خلال تنظيم بطولة كأس العرب، حيث تم تدوير نفايات وبنسبة وصلت إلى 70% في إحدى الملاعب. وتحقيقا للهدف 11 من برنامج الأمم المتحدة للتنمية المستدامة، سيتم تفكيك نحو 170 ألف مقعد من الملاعب ليتم إرسالها للدول النامية كمساهمة من دولة قطر. إن دولة قطر تعمل بصورة مشتركة مع دول العالم للحفاظ على التنوع الحيوي من خلال تطبيق الاتفاقيات الدولية والإقليمية ذات الصلة. كانت قطر السباقة في رفع تقريرها السادس لتنفيذ اتفاقية التنوع البيولوجي عام 2019، مشيرة في استراتيجيتها الأولى 2004 إلى الالتزام بذلك، كما قامت بتحديث الاستراتيجية وخطة العمل الوطنية لتواكب التوازن وتخفيف الضغوط على مكونات التنوع البيولوجي. وضعت دولة قطر التشريعات للتعامل مع حماية الموارد والحفاظ على الأنواع، ويتم متابعة برامج محددة لحماية الأنواع المهددة بالانقراض مثل السلاحف البحرية وأبقار البحر وأسماك القرش الحوت لإثراء وحماية التنوع البيولوجي البحري. وقد قامت قطر بتحسين القدرات المؤسسية وإصدار المراسيم الأميرية بإنشاء وهيكلة وزارة خاصة بالبيئة والتغيير المناخي. حققت دولة قطر زيادة كبيرة في نسب المناطق المحمية من خلال تخصيص مناطق جديدة، حيث بلغ إجمالي المساحات 24% من مساحة البر و3% من مساحة البحر، وتسعى الدولة إلى تحسين هذه النسب بشكل مستمر من خلال زيادة المناطق المحمية وتحسين إدارتها ليتماشى مع هدف 30-30 للإطار العالمي للتنوع البيولوجي. ولما بعد 2020 تسعى دولة قطر لإدارة مستدامة في تنمية الحياة الفطرية وتسعى دولة قطر من خلال المفاوضات إلى تحقيق التوازن المطلوب بين الطموح الحالي والمستقبلي لتنفيذ أطار عمل التنوع البيولوجي لما بعد 2020 من جانب، وضمان التدفقات المالية المناسبة لتحقيق تلك الأهداف. وشكرا.
谢谢大使阁下，感谢您的发言。现在我邀请蒙古国驻加拿大大使阿里翁·博尔德·亚德玛阁下发言，之后是布基纳法索。亚德玛大使阁下，有请。
Thank you, Chair. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to extend my warmest greetings to all of you who gathered here in Montreal to endorse the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. Our sincere appreciation goes to the governments of the People's Republic of China and Canada, as well as Secretariat of CBD for successful organization of the conference. Mongolia has deep belief that the parties to the COP-15 reach an ambitious, achievable, and yet measurable post-2020 GBF. Implementation of the participatory and inclusive GBF by all parties and stakeholders, regardless of the level of development, is of utmost importance. Mongolia is encouraging countries to strengthen their synergies among climate change, land degradation, desertification, and biodiversity issues in the implementation of the framework at national, regional, and international levels. As a member of High Ambitious Coalition, Mongolia is committed to increase its current 21% protected area to 30% by 2030 and to 35% by 2050. To reach this target, we will take freshwater basins and primary forest ecosystems under state protection and give special considerations to human-induced risky, intact grasslands and unique ecosystems that absorb most carbon. With appreciation to the development partners, Mongolia has gained well knowledge and experience to identify key biodiversity areas and connectivity sites in line with international acknowledged guidelines, and localized offset credit mechanism to accommodate environment, social, and economic balance and development project, which also can be counted as the result-based management methods for the conservation. Mr. Chair, Mongolia is one of the countries which is most vulnerable to climate change due to its geographical and climate conditions, economic sector structure, development level, and the population's lifestyle. To ensure long-term financial mechanism both for climate change and biodiversity, as well as to achieve CDGs and efforts to contribute to the global environmental agenda, developing countries like Mongolia greatly need capacity building, innovative and holistic approaches such as natural resource account methodology, introduction of ecosystem service payment principles, nomadic heritage and traditional knowledge, inclusive ecotourism development, and sustainable and resilient infrastructure. The 1 Billion Trees national movement initiated by the President of Mongolia, Ukhnagh is being implemented with support of active and strong commitment from all stakeholders in and out of Mongolia. I believe that the movement shall restore high part of degraded land, strengthen traditional knowledge, establish a strong dedicated partnership, and good practice fighting against environmental tripartite crisis. Thank you for your attention.
谢谢大使阁下，感谢您的发言。现在我邀请布基纳法索驻加拿大大使馆公使前参赞塞维林·邦迪奥·坎索诺阁下发言，之后是摩洛哥。坎索诺参赞阁下，有请。
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je voudrais tout d'abord vous remercier et remercier le peuple canadien et le gouvernement pour son hospitalité. Remercier aussi la République populaire de Chine pour avoir soutenu cette grande rencontre. Monsieur le Président, Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, mon pays, le Burkina Faso, à travers son gouvernement, est conscient des enjeux vitaux de la conservation de la diversité biologique et met en œuvre des actions multiformes. C'est ainsi que dans son référentiel de développement, le Burkina a retenu un objectif stratégique qui est d'inverser la tendance de la dégradation de l'environnement et des ressources naturelles pour favoriser la résilience climatique et la réduction des émissions des gaz à effet de serre. En effet, la monographie sur la biodiversité du Burkina Faso, élaborée en 2020, fait ressortir que le pays compte 531 espèces ligneuses, 1779 espèces herbacées, 301 espèces cultivées, 123 espèces de mammifères sauvages, 120 espèces de poissons, 520 espèces d'oiseaux sauvages, etc. Ce patrimoine constitue une composante majeure des grands équilibres environnementaux de notre pays et un cadre essentiel de la diversité biologique sous-régionale. Cet ensemble est soutenu sur un territoire de 273 187 km² par un réseau d'aires protégées constitué de parcs nationaux, de réserves partielles et totales de faune, de ranchs de gibier, de réserves de biosphère, dont un reconnu comme patrimoine mondial de l'UNESCO, de sites Ramsar, de forêts classées et de zones villageoises d'intérêt synergétique. L'exploitation de ces ressources biologiques contribue à 35% du PIB, avec une contribution moyenne annuelle d'environ 30% des ressources d'exportation. Sous l'effet conjugué des actions anthropiques, à qui il faut ajouter ces dernières années la présence de groupes terroristes dans certains domaines forestiers et fauniques, et le tout accentué par les effets néfastes des changements climatiques, les ressources naturelles du pays subissent des pressions multiformes. Ainsi, nous sommes de plus en plus préoccupés par le nombre élevé d'espèces en péril sur le territoire national. Face à ce fléau, des actions d'envergure, organisées dans un cadre global de mobilisation de tous les acteurs, sont indispensables. C'est pour cela que le Burkina Faso est solidaire avec l'appel de Kigali, la déclaration de Kunming en Chine, l'appel de l'Union africaine et de la CEDEAO, et soutient également les éléments majeurs inscrits dans les cibles du cadre mondial de la diversité biologique de l'après-2020. Monsieur le Président, le Burkina Faso, par ma voix, voudrait soutenir l'adoption d'un cadre mondial post-2020 de la diversité biologique qui permettra à toute l'humanité de poser des jalons sûrs en vue d'une meilleure conservation des ressources biologiques pour le bonheur de tous les peuples et de toutes les formes de vie sur Terre. Toutefois, il est conscient de la nécessité impérieuse qu'un mécanisme efficace soit mis en place pour la mobilisation des ressources qui permettra le financement additionnel de la biodiversité. Ainsi, il soutient la position du groupe africain sur cette question de la mobilisation conséquente des ressources. Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président.
谢谢参赞阁下的发言。现在我邀请摩洛哥王国大使苏里亚·奥马尼阁下发言，之后是波兰。奥马尼大使，有请。
Monsieur le Président de la COP-15 de la Convention des Nations Unies pour la biodiversité, honorable audience, la délégation du Royaume du Maroc se réjouit de prendre part au segment de haut niveau de la deuxième partie de la COP-15 et remercie le gouvernement de la Chine, le gouvernement du Canada et du Québec et le secrétariat de la CDB pour l'hospitalité et la parfaite organisation de cet important événement qui a pour objectif de parvenir à une position commune pour faire face à la crise de la biodiversité. Et à ce propos, Monsieur le Président, le Maroc souhaite d'emblée faire part de son plein soutien à la position exprimée par Madame la ministre de la République du Congo au nom du groupe africain ce matin. Comme l'ont souligné les interventions qui ont précédé celles de ma délégation, la thématique de ce segment de haut niveau, civilisation écologique, construire un avenir partagé pour toutes les formes de vie sur Terre, est un appel pressant à prendre soin de notre planète, de notre milieu naturel, de ses composantes et particulièrement de sa précieuse biodiversité, et ce, au moment où l'humanité est confrontée à de multiples crises environnementales en rapport avec les changements climatiques, avec les différentes formes de pollution, et notamment celle de l'air, et enfin avec la perte de la biodiversité et la menace sérieuse qui pèse sur 28% des espèces étudiées par l'Union internationale de la conservation de la nature. Tous ces constats, Monsieur le Président, imposent l'adoption d'un cadre mondial de la biodiversité post-2020 qui se doit d'être ambitieux et de mettre l'accent sur le fait que des mesures sont absolument rendues nécessaires à l'échelle mondiale, régionale et locale pour transformer nos modèles économiques, sociaux et financiers. Seule la mise en œuvre effective de ce cadre mondial contribuerait en effet à stabiliser la perte de la biodiversité au cours des 10 prochaines années, à rétablir les écosystèmes naturels sur 20 ans et à réaliser la vision de la Convention d'ici à 2050 et qui consiste à vivre en harmonie avec la nature. Il est cependant clair que la réussite de la mise en œuvre d'un tel cadre passe par la mobilisation d'investissements, lesquels permettraient le renforcement des capacités, le transfert des technologies, la promotion des partenariats mondiaux et la coopération nord-sud, sud-sud et triangulaire. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, la ratification récente par le Royaume du Maroc du protocole de Nagoya témoigne de son engagement sans réserve dans l'effort international de mise en œuvre des accords environnementaux multilatéraux et aussi de sa volonté propre pour lutter contre l'exploitation abusive de la biopiraterie de ses ressources génétiques. Le Maroc appuie la réalisation des stratégies et plans d'action nationaux de la biodiversité en tant que moteur principal de mise en œuvre du cadre mondial au niveau national. Comme le montrent nos 5e et 6e rapports nationaux, le Royaume a en effet pris un ensemble de mesures fortes sur les plans institutionnels, juridiques et opérationnels qui concourent à atteindre les objectifs de la stratégie nationale du développement durable. Le Maroc plante actuellement 50 000 hectares d'arbres par an et vise l'objectif de reboisement de 100 000 hectares d'ici 2030. Le Royaume, qui a aussi institué la Commission nationale du climat et de la biodiversité en vue d'assurer une mise en œuvre effective des dispositions des accords internationaux en la matière, a été élu en mars dernier président de la 6e Assemblée des Nations Unies pour l'environnement. C'est, Monsieur le Président, la bonne illustration et le fruit du leadership accumulé par le Maroc en matière de protection de l'environnement et du développement durable, ainsi que des initiatives ambitieuses menées sous la conduite et la vision éclairée de son souverain, Sa Majesté le Roi Mohamed VI. Je vous remercie pour votre attention et je souhaite plein succès aux présents travaux de la Convention.
谢谢大使阁下的发言。现在我邀请波兰驻加拿大大使维托尔德·杰尔斯基阁下发言，之后是危地马拉。杰尔斯基大使，有请。
Honorable Ministers and High Representatives of parties to the Convention on Biological Diversity, ladies and gentlemen, it is my great honor and pleasure to be here with you and deliver this statement on behalf of Ms. Anna Moskwa, Minister of Climate and Environment, Republic of Poland. Poland's biodiversity is one of the richest in Europe and is supported by a long tradition of nature protection. We have almost 40% of our territory covered by protected areas, including 23 national parks, 124 landscape parks, and almost 1,500 nature reserves. Almost 30% of our territory is covered with forests, managed in a sustainable way for many decades. Over 1,800 species of fungi, plants, and animals living in Poland are protected. Populations of many charismatic species like otter, peregrine falcon, or European bison, key species like beaver, and even large predators like wolf, which are indicators of a high level of biodiversity in Poland, are revived spectacularly. These days we are working very hard in order to develop a new global biodiversity framework, which aims at halting biodiversity loss all over the world. Involvement of all stakeholders at all levels is crucial for its successful implementation in the coming years. Regional instruments can help and show the way how to achieve it. A good example of such regional instruments is the Carpathian Convention, a legally binding agreement for protection and sustainable development of that mountainous region, shared by 7 countries in the central part of Europe. The Carpathians are a mountain range of global importance and a center of nature biodiversity in Europe, representing some of Europe's most significant remaining areas of natural ecosystems, providing essential habitat and refuge for the biggest population of large carnivores and many endangered species. Poland, as a current presidency of that convention, has organized in November this year a ministerial conference in Rzeszów, which among other issues discussed the implementation of biodiversity goals in the Carpathians. Ministers present at that conference adopted a declaration recognizing that the Carpathian Convention provides a regional mechanism for the implementation of the Convention on Biological Diversity and its new post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework in the Carpathians, translating the global goals and targets to the regional level and thus enhancing implementation in the region. Ministers declared that they will, number one, examine the possible input of the Carpathian region in the implementation of global goals and targets that will be adopted as part of the GBF at Conference of the Parties to the Convention on Biodiversity. Two, develop and implement the revised strategic action plan to the Carpathian Convention Protocol on Biodiversity that will reflect agreed post-2020 GBF and its goals and action targets, which shall be comprehensive and ambitious instruments to implement transformative actions by various stakeholders in order to achieve CBD 2050 vision to live in harmony with nature. Three, support the signing and the implementation of the revised Memorandum of Cooperation between CBD, the Alpine Convention, and the Carpathian Convention in the light of the new post-2020 GBF to enhance synergies and initiate common activities for the implementation of this new framework, as well as for sharing experiences with other mountain regions in the world. Four, promote mainstreaming in biodiversity within and across sectors by using the integrated approach of the Carpathian Conventions towards sustainable development and towards better implementation of the Agenda 2030 and relevant sustainable development goals. Carpathian countries stand ready to share their experiences in the fulfillment of above commitments with other regions and the whole CBD family. Thank you.
谢谢大使阁下的发言。现在我邀请危地马拉驻加拿大大使纳尔逊、拉斐尔、奥利弗、加西亚阁下发言，之后是斐济。加西亚大使阁下有请。
Muchas gracias, presidente. En nombre del presidente de Guatemala, doctor Alejandro Yamatei Falla, y del gobierno de mi país, Guatemala, deseo agradecer al pueblo y gobierno de Canadá, como país sede a la presidencia de la Secretaría, por la realización de estas importantes reuniones en la hermosa ciudad de Montreal. Guatemala es un país megadiverso, con una variedad de ecosistemas, especies y una diversidad genética de importancia global, con una población rica en cultura y con un amplio conocimiento tradicional. Gracias a ello, mi país a lo largo de los años y en particular durante la presente administración del presidente Yamatei se han impulsado incentivos para la conservación de nuestros bosques y el uso sostenible de nuestra extensa biodiversidad. Y se está trabajando fuertemente en reducir la deforestación mediante casos exitosos de concesiones forestales otorgadas a comunidades locales y aumentando considerablemente la reforestación y los sumideros de carbono. Se ha fortalecido la efectividad en el manejo, protección y vigilancia del sistema guatemalteco de áreas protegidas, el cual representa el 31% del territorio de mi país, y se está trabajando para mejorar la conservación de las áreas marinas y costeras. Señor presidente, las principales prioridades para Guatemala con respecto al marco global para la biodiversidad y COP-15 son, primero, la adopción de la meta global para la protección al menos del 30% de la superficie terrestre y marina. Segundo, la creación de un nuevo mecanismo financiero específico para la biodiversidad. Tercero, el compromiso por aumentar considerablemente la movilización de recursos financieros, tanto a nivel nacional como internacional, acorde al artículo 20 del convenio. Cuarto, la adopción de una decisión clara respecto a las posibles soluciones del mecanismo global de repatriación de beneficios, reconociendo que el uso de secuencias digitales son derivados de recursos genéticos y que también de mucha de esta información está relacionada a conocimientos tradicionales. Quinto, la decisión futura sobre el grupo de trabajo del artículo 8J, fortaleciendo la labor de este importante grupo. Y sexto, el respeto al uso tradicional, acciones colectivas y conocimientos tradicionales de pueblos indígenas y comunidades locales. Para finalizar, Guatemala ha participado activamente en los debates de estas conferencias de las partes con la esperanza de optar con un nuevo plan estratégico para la diversidad biológica, robusto y ambicioso. Asimismo, que cuente con mecanismos claros y transparentes de cooperación, partiendo de nuestras responsabilidades compartidas pero diferenciadas, estrechando aún más nuestros lazos de cooperación y de mutuo apoyo en beneficio de la conservación de nuestro planeta, de las presentes y futuras generaciones. Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
谢谢大使阁下，感谢您的发言。现在我邀请斐济常驻联合国代表团大使兼常驻代表萨迪安德拉·普拉萨德阁下发言，之后是阿尔及利亚。普拉萨德大使阁下，有请。
Thank you, Chair, Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I thank the government of China for its excellent stewardship of COP-15. Thank the government of Canada for generously hosting us, and to this great city of Montreal for what is surely the most consequential biodiversity conference in our generation. It is so consequential because we can walk away from here with a business as usual of an outcome. That will surely mean a future of economic devastation and widespread biodiversity collapse. We can, on the other hand, walk away with an alternative and a better outcome, an outcome where we give our natural world, our lands, our ocean, a fighting chance, and ultimately humanity itself its fighting chance. Excellency, Fiji is committed more than ever before to doing more than its fair share. We are expanding protection across our pristine 2.3 million square miles of Blue Pacific. We are committed to highly protecting 50 terrestrial and ocean biodiversity areas. We are expanding our primary forest cover. We are expanding the protection of vital reef systems. We are expanding protection of our mangroves. We are harnessing the energy of our young, of our coastal communities by launching 10,000 jobs for nature. We are advancing ecosystem restoration and nature-based solutions to our infrastructure. We are extending our moratorium on seabed mining. We are working together with our fellow small island developing states because together the Blue Pacific is home to more than 10% of global terrestrial biodiversity and over 40% of ocean biodiversity. This is what is at stake for us in the Blue Pacific and indeed for the world. We stand to lose this all if the world does not do its part by staying within the 1.5 degrees Celsius temperature rise. So we are here, called by history to do the right thing today. We are so close to so many planetary tipping points. The right thing at this point in history, when our biodiversity and natural world faces near collapse, is to deliver a CBD framework that gets the job done, and that is to return our natural world to a path of stability and restoration. Getting the job done includes highly protecting 30% of the world's ocean. It means protecting 30% of our lands. Getting the job done means that to those who must offer the resources on scale and in ways that are accessible by small island states. Getting the job done means to those who can to offer significant new investments to support our global effort to return our planet and life onto a pathway of stability. We must leave Montreal with a GBF that gets the job done within the decade. That must surely mean giving to future generations a fighting chance to live life as we have known it. There is another option. We can take at Montreal. That is, we can walk away having monumentally failed to agree a post-2020 GBF. That would be tragic. The stake on us, member states, could not have been higher. We are meeting in a historic window where we still have some playing time. We are now in overtime zone, in the code red. We know using a football analogy, that there are no penalty kick options to kick our natural world onto a path of stability. We only have us, the 196 member states of the CBD, and we have this rapidly closing window of opportunity during which we can still exercise leadership and offer hope. Fiji stands ready to work with the international community to deliver a Kunming, Montreal moment for nature. This is within our grasp. Let us get the job done. I thank you. Vinaka Vakalevu.
谢谢大使阁下的发言。现在我邀请阿尔及利亚驻加拿大大使努尔丁·巴格达伊德阁下发言，之后是巴拉圭。有请达伊德大使阁下，有请。
سيد الرئيس، السادة والسيدات الحضور، اسمحوا لي أن أستهل مداخلتي هذه بتوجيه جزيل الشكر للسلطات الصينية والكندية على الجهود المبذولة في التحضير لمؤتمر الذي يجمعنا اليوم. يؤكد السياق الدولي ضرورة الاعتبار للأنظمة البيئية كونها تلعب دورا محوريا في تحقيق التوازن بين متطلبات التنمية الاقتصادية وتلك التي لها صلة بالتنوع البيولوجي، كما لا بد من إيلاء الأهمية المناسبة للخدمات الإيكولوجية والمعارف التقليدية التي تشكل أحد مقومات سياسة التنمية المستدامة. السيد الرئيس، تسعى الجزائر جاهدة للحفاظ على الثروة الحيوانية والنباتية التي تزخر بها بالنظر إلى العوامل التي تهددها كالنشاط الإنساني والكوارث الطبيعية على غرار التصحر وحرائق الغابات وتغير المناخ. وتجسدت هذه المساعي الوطنية من خلال سياسة تقوم على استراتيجية وطنية وبرنامج عمل يهدفان إلى حماية النظم البيئية واستعمالها العقلاني والمستدام وتنميتها وتثمينها. وتتدرج عملية تأهيل توسيع وتطوير السد الأخضر الجزائري في إطار سياسات الدولة المحورية المتعلقة باستصلاح الأنظمة البيئية خلال الفترة 2023-2030 من خلال خلق مؤسسات ناشئة ومشاريع بيئية وتوفير فرص عمل في المجال البيئي خاصة للشباب. كما تتخذ الجزائر عدة تدابير تحفيزية بغية إنتاج سلع وتقديم خدمات متعلقة بالتنوع البيولوجي من خلال إنشاء تعاونيات محلية تشجع الاستغلال المستدام للتنوع البيولوجي بإشراك حوالي 8 ملايين امرأة ريفية بالنظر إلى مساهماتها الفعالة في الحفاظ على المعارف التقليدية وتعزيز التنمية الاقتصادية والاجتماعية. لقد طورت الجزائر خلال السنوات الأخيرة إطارها القانوني والمؤسساتي من أجل تنظيم الحصول على الموارد البيولوجية والمعارف التقليدية المرتبطة بها والتقاسم العادل والمنصف للمنافع الناشئة عن استخدامها، كما أنها تعمل من أجل إدخال هذا الإطار حيز التنفيذ. سيد الرئيس، يستوجب على المفاوضات الدولية الأخذ بعين الاعتبار المتطلبات التي تمليها النظم الغذائية وسبل الطاقة في الدول النامية بالعمل على أن تكون السياسات عاملة من شأنه أن يساهم في توفير الأمن الغذائي والصحي وتحقيق أهداف التنمية المستدامة. لذا يتعين على المجتمع الدولي أن يعمل لأجل إرساء إطار دولي طموح من أجل وضع حلول ومناهج لبلوغ الأهداف المسطرة من قبل اتفاقية الأمم المتحدة حول التنوع البيولوجي، مع العمل على ضمان التفعيل المتوازن لكل أحكام الاتفاقية وتوفير الوسائل الضرورية لهذا الغرض، أخذا بعين الاعتبار المادة 20 من الاتفاقية والتي تكرس مبدأ المسؤولية المشتركة والمتباينة، إذ لا يمكن للدول النامية خاصة الإفريقية منها بلوغ الأهداف المسطرة في هذا الإطار دون الحصول على دعم فني ومالي كافي يسمح لها بذلك. وفي هذا السدد يستوجب على المجتمع الدولي إرساء آلية تمويل خاصة للمادة 21 من الاتفاقية من أجل تعبئة واستعمال أنجع الموارد المالية الدولية المتاحة. كما يتوجب عليه السعي من أجل تسريع نقل التكنولوجيا الحديثة للدول النامية والعمل من أجل بناء تطور قدراتها، مما سيسمح بالوصول إلى الطموح الذي يسبو إليه هذا الإطار. ولقد بات من الضروري أن يشمل إطار التنوع البيولوجي لما بعد 2020 مسألة التسلسل الرقمي للموارد الجينية من ضمان تقاسم شامل وعادل للمنافع الناتجة عن استعمال الموارد الجينية. شكرا على حسن الإصغاء.
谢谢大使阁下的发言。现在我邀请巴拉圭驻加拿大大使劳尔·蒙迪尔阁下发言，然后是坦桑尼亚是下一个，请蒙迪尔大使阁下有请。
La República del Paraguay expresa sus más sinceros agradecimientos al Gobierno de Canadá por su hospitalidad, a la presidencia de esta COP-15 y a la Secretaría del Convenio de Diversidad Biológica por la organización de este encuentro. Creemos que el marco mundial para la diversidad biológica posterior al 2020 y las medidas que sean implementadas en virtud de este deben ser compatibles con los acuerdos multilaterales y no deben constituir barreras para el desarrollo de los países, respetando sus realidades locales y sus particularidades económicas, sociales y ambientales. Reconocemos que nuestro mayor desafío se centra en que los objetivos y metas resulten adecuadamente operativos y nos permitan avanzar correctamente en medios de implementación efectivos en la conservación de la diversidad biológica. Es por eso que consideramos que es urgente avanzar en la elaboración del marco mundial y que el mismo sea realmente beneficioso para todas las naciones presentes. En Paraguay, la agricultura y la ganadería contribuyen con la reducción de la pobreza y generan importantes oportunidades de crecimiento para las comunidades locales y grupos vulnerables, respetando las 3 dimensiones del desarrollo sostenible. En ese sentido, consideramos al comercio como un aliado para combatir las desigualdades existentes y fomentamos la eliminación de referencias vinculantes en el marco mundial que puedan representar subsidios distorsivos o cualquier tipo de barrera. Fomentamos la adopción de nuevas tecnologías de mejoramiento genético que representan nuevas herramientas para incrementar la eficiencia en la producción y en el uso de recursos, por lo que resulta necesario mantener el tratamiento de los temas de biotecnología en sus ámbitos específicos y dentro del alcance del CBD y sus protocolos. Recalcamos que es innegable el valor de la información genética, tanto como componente de los recursos genéticos silvestres, así como objeto de acceso a la distribución de beneficios. Destacamos la necesidad de que los mecanismos para el acceso a la distribución de los beneficios resultantes de la utilización de los recursos genéticos silvestres, en particular aquellos relacionados a los conocimientos tradicionales, deben estar disponibles para todas las partes del CBD, utilizando siempre un enfoque con fundamento científico, independientemente de los protocolos de los que sean signatarios. Reconocemos la importancia del acceso y participación plena y equitativa de los pueblos indígenas y comunidades locales, así como de las mujeres y niñas en los espacios de negociación y toma de decisiones relacionadas con la biodiversidad. Consideramos que la cooperación para la preservación de los ecosistemas y sus componentes es imperiosa, teniendo en cuenta las responsabilidades históricas, así como las capacidades nacionales respecto al nivel de desarrollo y condición socioeconómica de los países en desarrollo, en especial los países en desarrollo sin litoral. Confiamos en la importancia de la cooperación internacional para promover el diálogo e intercambio de nuestros países en el contexto de la elaboración de las estrategias nacionales de biodiversidad y el marco mundial para abordar las causas de pérdida de la biodiversidad y la adopción de políticas y medidas para asegurar su conservación y uso sostenible con inclusión social. Finalmente, aprovechamos la ocasión para destacar el reconocimiento como iniciativa emblemática de restauración mundial de la década por parte de las Naciones Unidas que el Paraguay ha recibido junto con Argentina y Brasil por los trabajos de restauración del bosque atlántico. Muchas gracias.
Gracias, 大使阁下的发言。现在我邀请坦桑尼亚联合共和国驻加拿大高级专员姆波基·乌利苏比西亚阁下发言，之后将是秘鲁。
The President of COP-15, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. This statement is made on behalf of the Honorable Minister Selemani Jaffo, the Minister of State, Vice President's Office, Environment. On behalf of my delegation and my own self, allow me to register my congratulations to you, Mr. Chairman and President, and members of your Bureau for steering the process that culminated in the preparation of the Global Environmental Framework. We register our appreciation to the governments of the people of the People's Republic of China and Canada for co-hosting this meeting and for the hospitality rendered in this beautiful city of Montreal. This registration of appreciation and commendation will not be complete without expressly mentioning the Executive Secretary, Madame Elizabeth Maruma Mrema, and the entire CBD Secretariat for the groundwork manifested in the timely availability of relevant documents, making our deliberations sound during this COP. Mr. President, the United Republic of Tanzania aligns itself with a statement made by Congo on behalf of the African Group. Tanzania is one of the mega biodiverse countries in the world. It recognizes the importance of biodiversity and the benefits it renders to the human well-being and a healthy planet. About 40% of the total terrestrial area of our country is designated as forest and wildlife protected. 6.5% of the territorial marine area is gazetted as protected and reserved, demonstrating our will to prioritize conservation of biodiversity while at the same time fostering sustainable use of its components, despite management challenges shared by other developing countries. The Global Assessment Report on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, issued by IPBES, cautioned that goals of conserving sustainable use of biodiversity and achieving sustainable development cannot be met by the current trajectories. The biodiversity goals of 2030 and beyond may only be achieved through a transformative process of changes across economic, social, political, and technological factors. The ongoing rapid decline of biodiversity, ecosystem functions, and many of nature's contributions by people mean that most international societal and environmental goals, such as the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, will not be achieved on the basis of current status quo trajectories, undermining the other goals as specified in the Paris Agreement, adopted under the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change and the 2050 Vision for Biodiversity. Mr. President, we note the excellent work done by parties in preparation for the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, where constructive and ambitious discussions have taken place and still are. The framework sets out on ambitious plans to implement broad-based transformative actions to bring societal change with a view to realize the vision of living in harmony with nature by 2050. We need to be mindful of the need for a framework with actions and targets whose implementation has been proposed by developing countries. Tanzania supports the proposed implementation, including the establishment of a global biodiversity fund to fill the current biodiversity financing gap. Number two, the establishment of a multilateral benefits sharing mechanism to utilize the digital sequencing information. And lastly, a sustainable practical capacity building development initiatives and a technology transfer without which none of the targets of the Global Biodiversity Framework will be realized. Mr. President, the United Republic of Tanzania is keen to see that the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework is consistent with the commitments, frameworks, processes, and plans established under other multilateral environmental agreements offering greater opportunities for the mainstreaming of biodiversity across society and develop synergies with other processes. Mr. President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I assure you of Tanzania's unfaltering commitment to cooperate for the best outcomes of this conference of the parties, and I want to thank you for your attention.
谢谢专员阁下的发言。现在我邀请秘鲁驻加拿大大使罗伯特·拉斐尔·罗格里格斯·阿尼拉斯阁下发言，之后是刚果。阿尼拉斯大使阁下，有请。
Muchas gracias, señor presidente. Distinguidos jefes de delegación, señores delegados, en primer lugar me sumo a quienes me han precedido en el uso de la palabra para agradecer a la presidencia china por su liderazgo en la conducción de este proceso, así como al gobierno canadiense por habernos acogido con su tradicional hospitalidad, y a la Secretaría del CBD por su constante e invaluable apoyo. El Perú, como país megadiverso, está firmemente comprometido con la conservación y el uso sostenible de la diversidad biológica y reafirma la necesidad de lograr un marco mundial para la biodiversidad post-2020 ambicioso y claro, que sea efectivo para revertir la pérdida de la biodiversidad mundial, que es la base para el desarrollo sostenible de países como el nuestro. De las metas propuestas, consideramos primordiales las enfocadas a lograr la conservación de al menos el 30% de zonas terrestres, aguas continentales y zonas marinas, la conectividad de los ecosistemas, el uso sostenible de los mismos y de las especies silvestres que son fuente importante de recursos para la economía y medios de subsistencia de los pueblos indígenas y las comunidades locales. Apelamos a todas las partes para apoyar estos elementos centrales para el marco mundial. Señor presidente, deseo ofrecer algunos ejemplos de cómo el Perú viene avanzando en estas medidas de conservación. En primer lugar, me complace anunciar que el Perú está reportando las primeras 2 OMEC a la base de datos mundial sobre áreas protegidas y OMEC, las concesiones de conservación Alto Guayabamba y Los Amigos, que suman casi 3 millones de kilómetros cuadrados. Otro importante esfuerzo es la reciente creación de la Reserva Nacional Dorsal de Nazca, primera área natural protegida 100% marina. Por otro lado, estamos promoviendo la formulación de políticas, normas, planes y programas relacionados con la conservación y uso sostenible de los humedales y las especies silvestres, con el comercio sostenible de fauna y con la movilización de recursos para la recuperación de ecosistemas, paisajes biodiversos y especies amenazadas. Esto teniendo en cuenta la articulación necesaria de los sectores competentes y los gobiernos regionales y locales. El Perú impulsa la puesta en valor de la biodiversidad para el beneficio de las comunidades locales y la ciudadanía en general, contando con numerosos productos de alto valor nutricional que contribuyen a superar los problemas de inseguridad alimentaria y malnutrición, constituyendo alternativas culturalmente pertinentes para diversificar y mejorar la alimentación y la economía familiar. Señor presidente, porque la naturaleza es una para todos y todas y en todos los países del mundo, hacemos un llamado para fortalecer los esfuerzos y los compromisos de las partes a fin de encontrar en la naturaleza soluciones eficaces para enfrentar los efectos del cambio climático, promover el enfoque de una salud y reducir las presiones sobre la biodiversidad, garantizando las sinergias entre convenios para concretar resultados de mayor impacto. El nuevo marco mundial para la biodiversidad post-2020 constituye una oportunidad y una manifestación del compromiso que necesitamos para nuestra supervivencia, porque somos parte de la naturaleza. Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
谢谢大使阁下的发言。秘书处告诉我刚果的部长不在，那我们接着往下。下面我有请泰国自然资源和环境政策与规划办公室秘书长菲隆塞亚斯帕尼奇博士发言。泰国之后将是斯里兰卡。泰国有请。在吗？把麦克风给泰国代表。有吗？如果
Can you ask them not to touch the console?
麦克风不要碰，它会自动打开的。有吗？这样，我们节省时间，我们先请斯里兰卡代表发言。有请斯里兰卡驻加拿大高级专员哈尔沙库马拉纳瓦拉特内阁下发言，有请。 请把麦克风给斯里兰卡。
Hello. Mr. President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I thank our best governments of Canada, Quebec, China for here in the beautiful historic city of Montreal. It is great pleasure for me to deliver this statement on behalf of the government of Sri Lanka, which is a biodiversity hotspot. Sri Lanka is endowed with a wide variety of ecosystem. It is one of the most biologically diverse countries in the Asian region. Despite its small size, Sri Lanka has varied climate and topography, which has resulted in a rich biodiversity in addition to having a high taxonomic diversity. Sri Lanka is also increasingly being subjected to high risk as reflected in the recently published National Red List. Out of 3,087 flora species, 1,496 are threatened. 863 endemic flora species were recorded, 522 species of avifauna were recorded, and 244 of them were assessed. Among them, 81 species are threatened. 97 freshwater fish species were assessed, out of which 61 species are endemic to Sri Lanka, whereas 51 species are threatened. Sri Lanka accepts the direct drivers of biodiversity loss are land, sea, use change, overexploitation, climate change, pollution, and invasive alien species which require regional level solution. Apart from those direct and common drivers of biodiversity loss, Sri Lanka being an island state, we are also uniquely and increasingly influenced by the transboundary air and marine pollution. This underscores the urgent need of having in place effective instrument and mechanism of safeguarding biodiversity of island nation like Sri Lanka. Such initiative may be voluntary commitments or legally binding instrument. In this regard, we would like to recognize Glow-Litter partnership to enhance regional cooperation to support transition of maritime transport and fisheries sector towards low plastic future. Also, we support the Regional Resource Center for Asia Pacific and AIT in their effort of revising the Malé Declaration on control of prevention of air pollution and its like transboundary effect for South Asia. Sri Lanka is always ready to stand with the international community for healthy and sustainable planet. We therefore spearheaded the UN Global Campaign on Sustainable Nitrogen Management in 2019. We also lead the Commonwealth countries as the champion of mangrove restoration. We supported the Kunming Declaration to accelerate the action towards achieving the 2050 vision of biodiversity. In terms of high-level political ambition, I would emphasize on the need to support sustainable coexistence of communities and ecosystem in terms of financial and capacity building intervention. Poverty and livelihood need are key social drivers negatively impacting biodiversity in developing countries such as Sri Lanka. We would like to support it by the including financial mechanism established under the convention. In conclusion, Sri Lanka support the upcoming post-2020 global biodiversity framework with more realistic and implementable targets, and we strengthen South-South, North-South, and a triangular cooperation in coming decade. Thank you.
谢谢专员阁下的发言。下面我们请泰国代表发言。在泰国代表发言之后，我们将开始国际组织的发言。泰国有请。
Mr. President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, on behalf of the Royal Thai government, I wish to extend our appreciation to the Government of Canada under the presidency of the People's Republic of China for hosting the second part of CBD COP-15 in the wonderful city of Montreal. I strongly believe that the outcomes of this meeting, especially the adoption of the post-2020 GBF, will help spearhead us toward a more effective biodiversity conservation and its sustainable use. Thailand is convinced that the post-2020 GBF will help reverse biodiversity loss globally. We will incorporate the post-2020 GBF goals and targets into our FIP and BSAPs. Thailand would like to stress the importance of increasing resources mobilization, including financial support, technology transfer, as well as capacity building to ensure the successful implementation, especially for developing countries. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, the planetary emergency of biodiversity loss and climate change place our world and the well-being of humankind at great risk. Transformative changes and ambitious commitments in our way of doing businesses and living are therefore urgently needed. In this light, Thailand strives to move forward greener with a more balanced and resilient growth through a bio-circular green economy model. The BCG model capitalizes on the country's strengths in biodiversity and employs technology to transform Thailand into a value-based economy, while ensuring full engagement of private sector, civil society, and local community. We are accelerating the enactment of the National Biodiversity Act, which will develop synergized mechanisms for sustainable utilization and equitable benefit sharing of our biological resources. Distinguished delegates, Thailand firmly believes in nature-based solutions. This is also part of our inclusive efforts to mitigate the impacts of climate change. Thailand's 20-year national strategy, 2018 to 2037, has set the target of expanding green areas up to 55% of the country's total land areas. We also commit ourselves to the 30 by 30 target for protected areas with an emphasis on marine and coastal biodiversity. Mr. President, I would like to emphasize that the efforts to reverse biodiversity loss and conserve biodiversity while also ensuring sustainable economic growth cannot be carried out by one country alone. Partnerships at all levels are crucial. Thailand will definitely do our utmost to foster partnerships and to work closely with all parties and stakeholders to save our biodiversity and ensure a better world for us all. And more importantly, ladies and gentlemen, for the brighter future of the next generation. Thank you very much. ขอบคุณครับ
谢谢您的发言，谢谢泰国代表。我们现在留下一些时间来听国际组织的意见。首先，我想邀请世界银行环境、自然资源和蓝色经济全球总监瓦莱丽·希基女士发言，有请。
谢谢 Chair, et merci à la ville et aux citoyens de Montréal pour la bienvenue. Excellencies, honorable ministers, COP-15 is taking place amid unprecedented challenges that are putting decades of development gains at risk and disproportionately affecting the poorest people on our planet. The global loss of nature is central to many of these challenges. The COVID-19 pandemic, for example, has highlighted the health risks associated with nature loss, while causing the biggest increase in global poverty in decades. And the next pandemic is likely to emerge at the arc of deforestation. The current food crisis is expected to drive millions more into extreme poverty, with too many millions already on the brink of famine, and their nature-based social safety net gone. This is why the World Bank Group considers nature a critical development issue to address poverty and inequality, to create economic opportunities, and to fight climate change. We see three strategic areas where transformational change is needed to revert nature loss and attain impact at scale. The first, nature should be placed at the core of development efforts. We need to move beyond conservation and instead apply a whole-of-economy approach that puts nature into sector policies and into economic and financial decisions. Chair, this is what we are already doing at the World Bank Group, where eco-economic development is our new watchword. Second, nature and climate are linked and must be addressed in tandem. We now have an opportunity to realize the potential of nature-based solutions at scale. And third, we must shift from just financing green projects to financing green economies. We must defragment the public and private biodiversity finance architecture, and we must adjust the cost of capital to unlock financing at scale for biodiversity. Unprecedented crises, Chair, call for an unprecedented response.
The World Bank Group, I'm happy to tell you, is rising to these challenges. We are a leading multilateral financier of nature and climate action, having directly invested $2.5 billion into nature in our last financial year. We provide data and analytics, technical assistance, and access to capital markets for countries, for corporates, and for communities who want to invest in nature-based solutions. The World Bank, the International Finance Corporation, and the Multilateral Insurance Guarantee Agency, together as the World Bank Group, are working to mobilize private finance for nature at scale to transform the way we build, the way we produce, and the way we consume. And once approved, we stand ready to support countries implement the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. We count on you, Excellencies, to deliver an ambitious framework that will help bend the curve of nature loss, and in so doing, build the green, resilient, and inclusive economies of tomorrow. Thank you.
谢谢您的发言。我现在邀请联合国工业发展组织技术合作总司执行干事周次勇先生发言，有请。
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, it is an honor for me to address this landmark international forum. UNIDO is strongly committed to work with all of you towards the adoption and the implementation of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. This is a crucial chance to sustain the web of life upon which humankind depends for food, water, health, climate regulation, and prosperity. The conservation and the sustainable use of biodiversity are embedded in UNIDO's mandate to promote inclusive and sustainable industrial development. We support all member states to steer their industries on a path to sustainability as a means to ensure conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity, as well as restoration of natural ecosystems. Distinguished delegates, circular economy is one of the promising solutions to address the triple planetary crisis of climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. UNIDO supports developing countries in a just transition to a circular, nature, and bio-based solution-oriented economy through the development of roadmaps and strategies, knowledge exchange and capacity building, leveraging of technological and financial resources, all of which translates into concrete projects on the ground. Biodiversity protection is intertwined with climate change action. UNIDO's climate change mitigation adaptation portfolio incorporates numerous natural positive components. These include, among others, eco-industrial park solutions, circular agro-business interventions, nature-based infrastructure installations, and the valuation of ecosystem services. Inspired by the outcome of the recent international climate talks at COP-27, we aim to sharpen our focus on promoting community-based resilience building through integration of ecosystem-based adaptation, resulting in protection of threatened ecosystems. Excellencies, at the heart of UNIDO's activities lies harness of the power of multi-stakeholder partnerships and collaborations. This combination of partnership building, policy coordination, and on-the-ground action is UNIDO's contribution to the efforts of the global community to build a resilient, diverse, and inclusive world for the current and the future generations. Together, united, we can avoid the global crisis and put our economies, societies, and our planet on the path to healing and recovery. I thank you.
谢谢您的发言。现在我邀请巴塞尔公约、鹿特丹公约和斯德哥尔摩公约秘书处副执行秘书卡洛斯·马丁·诺瓦拉先生发言，有请。
Thank you, Mr. President. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, pollution is one of the key drivers of biodiversity loss, as has been recognized as such in the Aichi Biodiversity Target number 8 and in the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework Target 7 now under discussion. as well as in the coming declaration, along with abundant scientific publications. Preventing, controlling and managing pollution by hazardous chemicals and waste is central to improve health, human well-being and prosperity for all. Together, the Basel, Rotterdam and Stockholm Conventions embody a life cycle approach to the sound management of chemicals and waste and form an overarching international legal basis for global efforts to address the adverse impacts of hazardous chemicals and wastes. As such, their implementation contributes towards addressing the three planetary environmental crises of climate change, pollution and biodiversity loss, as well as supporting the implementation of the 2030 Agenda. The Stockholm Convention is the international legal instrument to eliminate the production and use of persistent organic pollutants threatening biodiversity. The Basel Convention provides the international legal basis to regulate the transboundary movement of waste threatening biodiversity, as well as the guidance instruments to ensure the sustainable management domestically. The Rotterdam Convention provides the legal framework that promotes shared responsibility and cooperative efforts in the international trade of hazardous chemicals. During the high-level segment of the 2021-22 meetings of the Conference of the Parties of the Basel, Rotterdam and Stockholm Convention, just last month of June, ministers stressed that the implementation of the Basel, Rotterdam and Stockholm Conventions plays a crucial role in the development of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework and in achieving the national commitments under the Paris Agreement as well. Addressing pollution, climate change and biodiversity loss in an integrated manner offers win-win opportunities, optimizing the use of limited resources and achieving multiplying and accelerated solutions. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the Secretariat of the Basel, Rotterdam and Stockholm Conventions stands ready to continue strengthening the collaborative efforts and synergies between the biodiversity and the chemicals and waste conventions to build a shared future for all life on Earth. As requested by the 2021 and 2022 BRS Conference of the Parties, the Secretariat will be preparing a report including possible recommendations on how the Basel, Rotterdam and Stockholm Conventions could contribute to the post-2020 biodiversity framework once it is adopted in the coming few days, for consideration by the Conference of the Parties of the Basel, Rotterdam and Stockholm Conventions at their forthcoming meeting in May 2023 in Geneva, Switzerland. Thank you very much for your attention.
谢谢您的发言。下面将是我们今天下午的这个发言环节的最后一位发言人。我邀请东盟生物多样性中心执行理事特丽莎·蒙迪塔林女士发言。林女士，有请。
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or the ASEAN, Center for Biodiversity, or the ACB, underlines the important role of sub-regional and regional organizations, not only in shaping the post-2020 global biodiversity framework, but more importantly, in its implementation. Sub-regional organizations, especially those under very large and highly diverse regional groups, are in a unique position to contribute significantly in facilitating effective and concrete measures to meet global biodiversity targets. This is by supporting the efforts of similarly situated member states in accordance with their national priorities, circumstances, and capabilities, and maximizing available resources to do so. The ASEAN's contributions towards the achievement of global biodiversity targets are documented in the 3rd edition of the ASEAN Biodiversity Outlook. These accomplishments demonstrate the outcomes of collective and committed actions of the 10 ASEAN member states through the support of the ACB to coherent, science-based policy making, facilitating biodiversity data and knowledge sharing through the ASEAN Clearinghouse Mechanism and the ASEAN Biodiversity Dashboard, scaling up of conservation initiatives and resource mobilization mechanisms, delivering responsive capacity enhancement opportunities, raising awareness, and strengthening synergies among the CBD and other biodiversity-related multilateral environmental agreements. Nurturing partnerships enables the ACB to enhance the region's whole-of-community approach to mainstreaming biodiversity through inclusive cross-sectoral processes. These include building on the biodiversity and climate change nexus through the promotion of nature-based solutions and ecosystem-based approaches, addressing the interlinkages between health and biodiversity in line with our ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework, and strengthening ecological connectivity, restoration, and resilience through our ASEAN Green Initiative and ASEAN Heritage Parks Program. Through our ASEAN Youth Biodiversity Program, young leaders are meaningfully engaged and supported to contribute to our collective goals. The ACB also facilitates partnerships between governments and the private sector in the region to mainstream biodiversity in businesses and industries. In pursuit of mainstreaming biodiversity in tourism, the ACB will be supporting the International Ecotourism Travel Mart from March to April 2023 in the Philippines as an effort to promote sustainable and nature-positive tourism. With the ASEAN's call for a realistic yet ambitious and transformative post-2020 global biodiversity framework, the ACB welcomes partnerships across sectors as it continues to assist and support the ASEAN member states in making considerable strides towards the 2050 vision of living in harmony with nature. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
谢谢您，感谢您的发言。尊敬的各位部长、各位代表，虽然我们仍然有缔约方和国际组织要发言，但是我们需要议员休息，因此呢，我不得不暂停我们下午的发言。今天晚上，我们将在7点半在这重新开会，将从澳大利亚开始继续发言。我再次呼吁大家控制好发言时间，避免更多的延误。现在我宣布，今天下午的高级别会议全体会议结束。谢谢大家的配合，谢谢。
Okay, the bell worked really well. Yeah, the bell.